Devastating report has emerged, revealing the desperate state of Britain's armed forces, specifically our outdated tanks. A report by the Defence Select Committee, which actually was entitled Obsolescent and Outgunned, which I think sets a tone, doesn't it, for this report, says that basically we're bang in trouble if Vladimir Putin decides to try it on. We've gone right to the top with this, ladies and gentlemen. Very shortly we'll be joined by Chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, on this very issue. We'll be going transatlantic as well and speaking to none other than the actual founder of the National Tea Party movement in America, Michael Johns, because it's been a bad week for Joe Biden, hasn't it? He forgot the name of his defence secretary, he forgot the name of the Pentagon, his dog had to be sent back to Delaware because it apparently bit someone in the White House. Rough week for Sleepy Joe. We'll be talking all about that. We'll be picking through the charred remains of our economy with economic expert Emily Carver. Our GDP is shrinking and so is our trade. But first, the big news of the day. There are calls today for Cressida Dick, the chief of the Metropolitan Police, to resign after the Met Police got involved with this Sarah Everard vigil last night, and it's there that we're starting the show.
Across the UK, online, on DAB and on your smart speaker. This is Talk Radio.
Yeah, so yesterday a man appeared in court charged with the murder and kidnap of Sarah Everard. He was remanded in custody and will appear at the Old Bailey on Tuesday. He is a serving Metropolitan, or was, I suppose, a serving Metropolitan police officer. This is a highly emotive issue and topic, and many women are coming out and saying that they don't feel safe on Britain's streets, and enough is enough. There was due to be a vigil for Sarah in Clapham Common last night. Organisers had actually cancelled it. The Met Police even thanked them for cancelling it, but it went ahead anyway, and hundreds of people gathered there to pay their respects and call for change, really, call for something substantive to be done. The Met Police then decided to get involved and started arresting people. There are some shocking pictures of women essentially having their faces pushed in the dirt while police are arresting them. Not a good look for the Met, not a good look at all. There are calls this morning for Met Chief Cressida Dick to resign. Priti Patel is demanding a full report from the Met Police on this. For the latest on this now, the latest facts in what is clearly a deeply disturbing case, we are going to be joined by Talk Radio's Head of News, David Spencer. David, thank you very much for joining us this Sunday morning. Look, this vigil was clearly took place, and the police are copping it. There are calls, aren't there, for Cressida Dick to resign over the way that the Met policed this vigil.
Yeah, those calls have sort of intensified over the last few hours, and as we get the Sunday morning round of interviews, I think that's only likely to intensify as we get more people talking about what happened last night. Let's take you back to Friday evening when there was the High Court hearing about this vigil, and this claim to sort of reverse the decision, this sort of bid to use the court to reverse the decision not to allow this vigil to take place. And the High Court effectively ruled, the judge ruling, that actually can't really intervene in this case. There are actually circumstances when in England during the lockdown and during the pandemic, there are opportunities, if you can agree between the police, the local authority and those organising events, that you can have gatherings of some sort outdoors. And it was pushed back for the groups to have a discussion and reclaim these streets, and Met Police were then encouraged to continue their talks, which went into yesterday morning, but eventually early yesterday we had confirmation that actually organisers said that they would cancel the events and urge people to take part in different ways. It was always bound to be some sort of gathering, though, after what we've seen in terms of the emotional outpouring from people over the last week. And the pictures that we've now seen from last night, whatever position you think, just look awful. And we've had like the victims commissioner, Dame Vera Baird, saying this morning, describing some of the police action as almost military in the way that they were organising it. And obviously, as you've said, Patrick, the calls for the top police officer in the UK, Cressida Dick, to stand down, intensifying. And Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, even saying that she needs answers to why this happened and why we saw those horrible pictures.
Yeah, we've got a poll on this at the moment at Talk Radio. Check us out on Twitter. Just asking you whether or not you think that Cressida Dick, the chief of the Met Police, should resign over the Met Police's handling of this Sarah Everard vigil that took place last night in Clapham Common. You can call us 03444991000. Should the police have essentially turned a blind eye? I suppose that's the issue, isn't it, really? You know, there are coronavirus laws, and clearly, by definition, to have a vigil, you have to have a gathering, and that is banned, I suppose, isn't it? So were the police actually correct to behave in the way that they did? David, just in terms of the facts of where we are in this case at the moment, I understand that a gentleman appeared yesterday and has been remanded in custody, charged with the kidnap and murder of Sarah Everard. Where are we with that?
So just to go back to yesterday morning at Westminster Magistrates Court, the first court appearance in relation to this case, 48-year-old Wayne Cousins, the serving Metropolitan Police officer, appearing in court charged with Sarah Everard's kidnap and murder. Some details emerged from that, but he just appeared to confirm his name and essential details, and actually was asked to speak up at one point because he was speaking very quietly in that court appearance. We will then have the next court appearance at the Old Bailey on the 16th of March. That's Tuesday, obviously, and there's been no plea yet, which is fairly standard because this just moves from magistrates to the next level of court appearance, and that's when we'll then get an update in this case in terms of the criminal proceedings.
David, thank you. Excellent stuff that. David Spencer, Talk Radio's head of news, just whizzing you through all the very latest in relation to the Sarah Everard case. Now, I wanted to talk to somebody who was on the scene. I wanted to talk to somebody who actually witnessed firsthand the police response to this vigil last night. And on the line right now is Christys Cowgie, who is, aside from just being an eyewitness, of course, he is kind of head honcho at Guido Fawkes. He's a man with the finger on his pulse more than anybody else, arguably, around the Westminster political scene. Cowgie, thank you very, very much for joining me. Look, what did you see last night? What did it look like to you? Just talk me through the actual events as you saw them.
Yeah, well, we turned up. We were always going to turn up regardless of what the Met said because we feel very strongly about this. We turned up at about 6:30, and that was very much the end of at what point you could describe it as perfectly peaceful. And as we were arriving at the bandstand in the middle of Clapham Common, you could see police turning up on the scene, and about 30 minutes later, we did see some police officers walking behind us, and we heard on the radio that they should begin enforcement. And it was a couple of minutes later that they forced their way onto the bandstand completely unnecessarily. It was a perfectly fine vigil. Frankly, I could have seen the argument for them turning up, but standing on the exterior, not getting involved, turning a blind eye. But they decided to force their way onto the bandstand, and it got very, very ugly indeed from that moment on. So
it's entirely the police's own actions. There was nothing happening. There was no, it wasn't kicking off at all. There was no well, there was obviously civil disobedience by definition. There was a gathering. However, there was no kind of major issue brewing there. This was the police's decision to, as you said then, start enforcement. And that's actually what caused all of these kind of quite concerning images, isn't it, of women basically having their faces pressed into the dirt and being nicked for trying to show solidarity with a very tragic woman.
It was completely awful scenes, and as I say, it was a perfectly quiet, respectful, mournful occasion. Even when we arrived, and for those first 20 minutes, it was perfectly lovely. And then as they got onto the bandstand, the violence didn't really happen for a while. I mean, even though they went onto the bandstand, there was a lot of booing, there was a lot of chants of let her speak, and trying to, tell them to back off. And it was probably about an hour later when they tried to disperse the crowd that naturally things got very, very ugly indeed. And of course, this whole thing is a PR disaster because even outside of the context of what we understand may have been a serving officer's role in this case. This was essentially Metropolitan Police officers getting violent against women at a vigil against women's violence. And there are some massive questions to be asked of the leadership there about who thought for a second that would play out well.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, this is just absolutely catastrophic in both its optics and, frankly, just the outright facts of this issue. And there are calls for Cressida Dick to resign over this. Do you think she will?
I can't say whether she will because I don't know Cressida Dick's mind well enough. But what I will say is that calling for someone to resign in politics is always a risky game. And very often the people doing it are doing it to make a headline. You often see the third party in British politics, the Lib Dems in this case, calling for resignations because it's a very easy headline for them to make in a way that the official opposition don't, because they usually are better at playing this sort of politics. You should only call for someone to resign when you know the alternative will be better. And I don't know anyone who knows the current hierarchy and leadership of the Metropolitan Police well enough to say that whoever might replace Cressida Dick would be a better leader than Cressida herself.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. We've had loads of reaction, as you can imagine, on this. You can call up 03444 99 1000, text talk and your message to 87222 or tweet us at Talk Radio. Dave's been in touch. This police commissioner was the wrong choice at the beginning. The Stasi's were out to control. The police were out of control, he says. That's his view. What's your view? 03444 99 1000. Calgie, this clearly was terrible optics, as we've said. What was the reaction, though, from the protesters that you saw? You know, clearly when the police stepped in, whether or not they should have done that, that's the big issue. But what was the reaction from the people at the vigil? You know, was there a bad reaction from them? Is this all, are we being a bit too one-sided in the negativity of the police here?
I think the people who were directly confronted by, everyone was angry. And if you were confronted by the police, that anger came out in the form of resistance. They weren't happy to just leave the bandstand. I mean, for God's sake, the police were trampling on the flowers that had been left for the victim.
Dear me.
And obviously pushing the faces into the ground. The people away from the bandstand who were having to watch this were angry. It was incredibly distressing because what happened was you turned this vigil into something none of the participants wanted it to become. It looked like a protest, and we left the bandstand. We'd hoped to go and pay our respect and have a quiet moment of contemplation with a group of well-wishers from the local community, and that was denied because instead what it became was this angry confrontational protest, and we weren't allowed to sit there in quiet contemplation with our thoughts, with our memories, and that frustration is greater than it was before we went to the protest, and this is going to continue, this anger, this outpouring emotion, for much longer now because of the police's reaction last night.
Christian, thank you very, very much. Really insightful stuff. Christian Calgie there is a reporter at Guido Fawkes who was on the scene last night as the Met Police did not cover themselves in glory. In fact, quite the opposite. Indeed, we've got a poll running at the moment at Talk Radio. Should Cressida Dick, the head of the Met Police, resign over the Met's response to this Sarah Everard vigil? You heard there firsthand police trampling on the flowers at this vigil for poor Sarah Everard and you know, roughing up, essentially, it looked to me like, anyway, with the pictures. There was certainly a lot of manhandling taking place of these people who were there to show solidarity in what has been a deeply, deeply distressing case. But look, we'll be talking about this throughout the show. You can get in touch, of course. You can 03444 99 1000. The phones are lighting up. We'll go to the phone shortly. When we come back, well, in fact, right now, actually, we're going to shift this on. We're going to go now to Tobias Elwood, who is chief of the Select Defence Committee. And now there's been a very, very devastating report that's emerged today, and I'm just getting it up here in front of me now. I was quite surprised by this. A report by the Commons Defence Committee into our capability of our military's armoured vehicles. It is titled Obsolescence and Outgunned, so that kind of gives you a flavour of the tone of this. It said that in any artillery duel between the modern British and Russian division, it is likely to end one way and not necessarily to the British Army's advantage. I suppose that's quite diplomatic language. Look, on the line right now, we've gone right to the top. The chair of the Defence Select Committee is Tobias Elwood. Tobias, thank you very, very much for joining us this Sunday morning. Really appreciate you making the time for us. Look, how has it come to this? Have we just had issues with procurement? Are we safe now, really?
Well, it's a really good question. Are we safe? Because the types of threats are changing as we speak. The character of conflict is moving more to the digital domain. We're being affected every day by constant competition, attacks through cybersecurity and so forth. But ultimately, you've got to watch your backs. And ultimately, over the last 20, 30 years, we've neglected to upgrade our armed force capability.
And how far off are we? I mean, should we be concerned about this? A lot of people listening in now might think, look, the government has one ultimate duty, which is to protect its citizens and protect the people who reside within its nation. And you have to look at this report now and says that apparently the army is 4 years away from being able to field a warfighting division. I would imagine that's the minimum I would expect my army to be able to do. I mean, are we in trouble here?
We are in trouble, and I'm pleased that you're covering this report, because there seems to be this tilt, this energy towards, to go towards the South China Sea. We need to watch our backs far, far closer to home. And our tank is over 20 years old. Our warrior fighting vehicle is even older than that. If we don't upgrade these things, these conventional capabilities, it'll come back to haunt us, because these threats have not disappeared. Extremism continues across the Middle East. Yemen may be a place where we'll need to go and help stabilization if there's a political resolution there. Across the Sahel, we have troops there now as well. We can't presently match all our commitments. We are overstretched. And the idea that we're going to pivot across to the South China Sea when we don't fully understand what, our answer is to the growing threat of China. We need to recognize that we must invest in our conventional capabilities, cutting back 10,000 troops, cutting back our tanks, cutting back our warrior fighting force, and then add to that the RAF. We're going to lose Typhoons. We're going to lose the F-35Bs. We're also going to lose frigates as well. Our armed forces are diminishing in size at a critical time. For me, this is actually like the 1930s at the moment. Authoritarian powers are on the rise. You've got denial of the growing threat. I touched on China. The West perhaps in denial, lack of international cohesion, global institutions, the UN not really working, and countries like us reducing our military footprint. These are very, very dangerous times indeed for us to drop our guard.
I couldn't agree with you more. As you've said there, this is a fertile ground for chaos at the moment on the international scene, isn't it? And I think when it comes to those particular moments in history, you might as well prepare yourselves and just in case. And so, look, what's the answer? Do we just need more money? Or people might say, hey, look, if we can reduce our foreign aid budget, maybe we can put it into our defence. Is the answer just more money? How does this work?
Well, firstly, you've got to ask yourself, what are the threats? And how do we then deal with that? China, for me, the Cold War has already started, but we're in denial. They are nudging us out of our relationships, our bonds, our connectivity with our Commonwealth friends across Africa, across the Middle East, and elsewhere. Now, when they then develop those trading bonds, our prosperity then goes down. They are developing military bonds as well. We are then getting pushed out. So the size of the West is getting smaller and smaller. The size of the Chinese footprint is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, absolutely, we need to watch our backs from a cyber and space perspective, but ultimately, we need to actually create stronger bonds with our friends across the world. And you do that through upstream engagement by staying close to who you actually value. And we're stopping to do that. And you can only do that if you have the necessary hard power, and dare I say, the soft power as well, because we don't explain that to the British people enough as to how educating people abroad actually helps build governance there. It stops extremism and terrorism developing. It also builds prosperity opportunities as well.
We talk very often, don't we, about our armed forces being world leading, the quality of the training, and certainly when it comes to things like our SAS and things like that. But at the moment, isn't it the equivalent of essentially buying a Ferrari in our armed forces and then clamping it on your driveway because we're not giving them the equipment that they might need to go out and actually do the business if they were ever called upon? That surely is a concern. I mean, it's almost like cutting ourselves off at the knees, isn't it?
Completely. You mentioned the SAS. One of the things that we are recognized across the world for are our special forces capabilities. And yet we're cutting our Hercules C-130 fleet. This is what they use to get about and do their business. So there again is another cut that's coming through, along with the BAE 146 and other aircraft too. We are so, reducing our conventional footprint, and that's very, very dangerous indeed. I really do hope the Prime Minister recognizes that they need to give greater clarity to the MOD as to what we need to do to strengthen our bonds with other countries. And we do that through this basic conventional capabilities.
Look, I think there's potentially a wider question here, which is why would anyone want to join our armed forces now? Because clearly there's an issue with procurement of and effective weapons and equipment, and we're seeing this with this new report that's just emerged today from the Defence Select Committee, revealing really that if it came to essentially, direct combat between the Russians and our armoured divisions, then essentially there would only be one winner, and it probably wouldn't be us. But you look at you're going into the armed forces now, and maybe we wouldn't look after you in battle, given the tone of this report, but certainly we don't look after you when you come home a lot of the time as well. There's huge amounts of homelessness and issues like that, and mental health problems with a lot of our veterans who are, despite the fact that there is an armed forces covenant there, which my understanding of that is designed to ensure that people get priority housing and mental health care if they've gone and served this nation in wartime. That often isn't actually coming to fruition. And so there is this wider picture. Is that why would you want to join the armed forces? They won't look after you in battle, and they won't look after you when you come home.
Well, this is why people like me are speaking out. So be it that we do look after you in battle and look after you when you come home. When you join the armed forces community, you join it for life. And absolutely, you touched on some important aspects of making sure that as a veteran, you are looked after, you receive the mental health support that you absolutely deserve. That's part of the armed forces covenant. But I would say that we remain to have the most professional armed forces in the world. We can rely on them to do such a wide spectrum of things. How they've actually performed during the pandemic is another great example. But they also watch our backs. They allow us to sleep at night and make sure that we are safe. We need to allow them, give them the tools so they can continue to do that. And therefore, recruitment will then continue and we can remain safe. But further than that, we show a leadership role. We step forward when other nations hesitate. And you have a new American administration wishing to absolutely do that, because we've become risk averse over the last 10 years, giving space to authoritarian regimes, not least China and Russia, to fill those vacuums. And one thing that we've done in the last century or so is show the thought leadership, the statecraft, the ability to run HQs, provide solutions as to what the difficult problems are. That's what we offer to the United States. That's why they like working with us. And we need to rekindle that spirit, expand the Whitehall bandwidth to make sure that that can happen now.
You mentioned China and indeed Russia a few times. In fact, this report explicitly mentions Russia and compares our capabilities to theirs in a less than favourable tone, it's fair to say. How at risk are we of some serious conflict with China or with Russia? Do you think that this is brewing now?
I don't think either country wants a direct conflict with us, because where this could escalate to is so huge that both will actually avoid that. The way it will be done is that they're going to flex their muscles and move into ungoverned space. Look what Russia did in Syria. Look what they did in Georgia. Look what they did in Ukraine and in the Crimea. That's what they do. Now, you stand up to that by having conventional forces to prevent them moving in the first place. That's how we should be working together with our NATO allies. On China, it's a slightly different front, and I touched on this. They are nudging us out right across the world through their One Belt, One Road programs, making these countries become subservient to Chinese thinking and influence. And that means our ability to hold China to account through the UN becomes weaker, because we can't get the number of countries to stand up to China, because they all owe China money or are in debt in some form or have military bases on their backyard. And that's what we need to wake up to. Currently, we're in denial about what is happening with China. We need that Sputnik moment. That's the first time that the Americans woke up to the threat of the Soviets was when a Sputnik satellite, flew across. Do we have to wait for the, Taiwan to fall before we recognize where China is going? They're on a different trajectory. They're on a geopolitical clash with the West, and we need to acknowledge that.
Look, I think as well, just aside from the overt potential aggression that the Chinese government poses, not just to us, but to the world order, I mean, when you do consider, I'm not for 1 second, by the way, advocating war with the Chinese, something I would not particularly enjoy. However, when you look at the reasons behind why we went to war in Iraq, for example, to liberate this group of people, to bring them democracy because we wanted to stop them getting weapons of mass destruction, we thought that maybe they were led by a bit of a despot. Well, hang on a minute, all of those things are happening in China. I mean, there's genocide happening in China, for goodness sake. I think it's time we were a bit more upfront, frankly, in calling out the Chinese government for their pretty heinous actions. But look, Tobias, thank you very much for making the time with us. Just before I let you get going, just quickly, please, your message to Boris Johnson on this issue. Now, this report says, we've got procurement issues with the armoured elements of our armed forces. What would you say to Boris?
Well, I hope he heeds and recognises the importance thing. I know he's absolutely passionate about doing what's best for our armed forces. We are at a critical moment now where we either decide to remain active on the international stage, be front-footed, or we remove ourselves from having a say and having the ability and the passion to be able to get involved in some of the challenges around the world.
Thank you very, very much, Tobias Elwood. It's excellent to get you on, Chair of the Defence Select Committee, reacting live to this report that's just come out this morning from the Defence Select Committee into issues with our armed forces and our procurement and with our artillery. Essentially, basically, we would be hopelessly under-equipped and we would be outgunned by the Russians. This is the uptake of that report. We've had loads of people getting in touch on Twitter at Talk Radio. You can join this discussion 03444991000. Text talk and your message to 87222. Thank God for your voice, Tobias Elwood. Honour and truth. That's from someone there on Twitter. Thank you very much for getting in touch. Right, when we come back, we're going to be joined by John Craig, Chief Political Correspondent of Sky News. There's a lot to get stuck into here as well. We're also going to be whizzing you through all of the Sunday papers with James Bull, journalist and author of Post-Truth. We'll be speaking about all things news-related, of course, what's on the front pages and what's inside the book as well. 03444991000. It's Patrick Christys on Talk Radio.
On DAB Plus and on the Talk Radio app.
It seems to me to be a slight overreaction to a very small study.
Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on Talk Radio. Thank you very much for tuning in. Look, we are doing a Twitter poll today, which is whether or not the Met Police Chief, Cressida Dick, should resign over the Met's response to the Sarah Everard vigil, which took place last night in Clapham Common. There were arrests. There were some terrible optics, really, of police officers treading on the flowers at this vigil, essentially wrestling women out of off a bandstand and rubbing their faces in the dirt as they arrested them. It was just absolutely shocking scenes. And to be honest with you, I don't understand why they felt the need to do it. We did have an eyewitness on earlier on, Cowgie from Guido Fawkes, who was present at the time, saying that all he heard was a police officer's radio go off saying it's time for enforcement, and then they decided to step it up. No need for it whatsoever, as far as I can tell. But what are your views? There are essentially mixed bag on this, actually. A lot of people saying, hang on a minute, this was essentially an illegal gathering that did break coronavirus laws, and as much as it is a sensitive topic and a deeply emotive and important topic, it still possibly shouldn't have gone ahead. Your views, 03444991000 is that number. Text, talk, and your message to 87222. You can watch us on YouTube as well, as indeed thousands of you are. Thank you very much for tuning in. And if you do view us on YouTube right now, you will see this lovely face of John Craig, geopolitical correspondent at Sky News. Time to introduce John to the discussion. Thank you very much, John, for making the time for us this Sunday morning. I know we're going to go on and talk a little bit about the royal family, but just quickly on this, the burning issue of the day is the police response to this Sarah Everard vigil. Your view on that?
I think Cressida Dick's in deep trouble now. It was last night, it was Sir Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, who called for her resignation. If you add to this fiasco the whole controversy over the Operation Midland, the hounding of the late Sir Liam Britton and so on, the way that was handled, and you go back to Cressida Dick's record in the Stockwell shooting all those years ago. Some people saying, how was she ever made Met Commissioner? But over the last 24 hours, many people have made the comments, quite rightly in my view, compare the police action at Clapham Common with the Scottish police when Glasgow Rangers won the Scottish Premiership a week or so ago. And also in the summer, last summer, when Liverpool won the Premier League, the police decided just to let things go. The other points I'd make are that during the week, last week, we heard at it was the Science and Technology Select Committee, Sir Patrick Vallance and Professor Chris Whitty, both saying outdoor gatherings are not really the problem with coronavirus. And during that very long session of evidence, it was Sir Patrick Vallance, I think, who said that the evidence from demonstrations in New York were outdoor demonstrations, where they weren't a problem. And listening to Professor Whitty, he said that the scientists and the medics' big fears in terms of the Prime Minister's roadmap out of lockdown are not really when people start gathering in pub gardens, but the May the 17th date, when people start gathering indoors in pubs, restaurants, and everything else. All the science and evidence seems to be now, it's not outdoor gatherings that are the problem with COVID. It's indoor gatherings, sweaty pubs, sweaty nightclubs, whatever. So I think the police tactics here last night were awful.
To be honest with you, I just absolutely cannot believe that they did what they did. Hi, Patrick. Friends of Sarah Everard were not going to attend any vigil because they knew it would be hijacked by the usual suspects and turned into a political demonstration with one agenda, which was anti-police, and it happened. That's from David in Newcastle. Look, that's David's view, obviously. What's yours? 03444991000. Text, talk, and your message to 87222. Look, I mean, this clearly was a massive issue. It just raised another wider point, doesn't it, which is how safe are women on Britain's streets? That's the thing out of something so terrible, and this is deeply awful what's happened with Sarah Everard. There might actually now be some kind of change. Is there any indication as far as you're concerned really about what this change could substantively look like? I know we spoke yesterday about this harebrained idea for a 6 p.m. curfew for blokes. I mean, that's not really going to happen, is it? But I mean, what do you think the government could actually introduce here to try and to make women feel safer? Is it a question of more police?
Just on that point about the usual suspects, remember that it's not that long ago that the police were taking the knee, as it's called, allowing Black Lives Matter protests to go ahead. There seem to be double standards here. The police seem to pick and choose which demonstrations they want to allow to go ahead and which they don't. And it was crass the way the police behaved last night. And I think the police managed to unite both Labour, Liberal, Democrat, Conservative politicians. Anyway, as for what's coming down the road in terms of legislation, tomorrow, as it turns out, the House of Commons is debating this massive new crime bill. It's called the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill.
Catchy.
Which has got so much in it, including actually tougher curbs against demonstrations. Now, this is all geared to trying to prevent Extinction Rebellion from having demonstrations close to Parliament, and so on. Pretty draconian powers on demonstrations in that bill. There are all sorts of things, actually. You can get, I think it's a 10-year jail term for vandalising a statue. There are some tougher penalties for sex crimes, longer sentences and so on. But the point I would make is, clearly, this is an opportunity for opposition, and indeed any politicians really, to amend the bill as it goes through Parliament. Now, Jess Phillips, the Labour spokeswoman on domestic violence and safeguarding, has been on TV today talking about amending that legislation. There's another piece of legislation, I think it's the domestic abuse bill, which I think I'm right in saying is in the Lords at the moment. And there are opportunities to amend that as well. So there are plenty of opportunities to amend the law coming up. 2 bits of legislation currently going through Parliament.
Yeah, look, it's obviously big times in that particular field. I just wanted to move on slightly because, look, this issue of the Sarah Everard's vigil and the police's response to it, we're going to be talking about throughout the show. We've got a Twitter poll running. What's your view at Talk Radio, whether or not you feel as though Cressida Dick, the chief of the Met Police, should go? But we did actually also want to get you on another news story. There's more than one story in town this morning, John. The Palace raises the stakes in the Meghan inquiry. This is on the front of the Sunday Times. Buckingham Palace's inquiry into claims that the Duchess of Sussex bullied royal staff is to be handed to independent investigators. Do you think they should just let this go now? Is this just giving more oxygen to that particular fire that is Meghan and Harry? What's your take on exactly what's happening at the moment then?
Well, they clearly don't want to let it go, do they? Because they brought in an independent law firm. I suppose you could argue that's probably a sensible move, so they can't be accused of a stitch-up if they do an in-house investigation. On the other side, Meghan and her advisors are demanding to see legal documents and legal papers. So it does sound as though this is shaping up to be quite a battle. But I think if the palace are serious about investigating it thoroughly, probably bringing in independent lawyers to do the investigation is probably a good idea. I
think you're absolutely spot on that this is a bit of security, isn't it, for the palace? I suspect that actually now, they can point to the fact that this was done independently. It'll be interesting to see how this kind of soap opera progresses. John Craig, thank you very much, my good man, for making the time for us this Sunday morning. Chief political correspondent at Sky News, no less. Now we're going to go to the phones. 03444 991000 is that number. Text talk and your message to 87222. And David joins me now. David, what do you want to talk about?
Hi, Patrick. It's just about the vigil last night.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go on, talk to me.
Yeah, well, I feel sometimes like I'm living on a different planet because the message couldn't be clearer from the government that we need to maintain social distancing. And I can't understand why last night, if they insisted on a vigil, they themselves could not organise social distancing themselves.
Well, they'd actually put this forward. So the organisers of this event, I believe they're called Reclaim Our Streets. I think that's their name. I could be wrong. But they actually did offer to the police to have a socially distanced procedure in place. So maybe even have time zones where you could go to Clapham Common at a particular time, then you'd have to be out again. So I think the organisers themselves were trying to do their bit. They then ended up cancelling it, of course, didn't they? Look, regardless of whether or not it should take place, and look, by the letter of the law, you're absolutely right, David, it shouldn't have taken place. But that said, what did you make of the police's response to it?
It's very easy to judge from a distance. I wasn't there, so I prefer not to get into that, Patrick, if that's all right.
Look, absolutely. I mean, it's clearly a very, very emotive issue that's going on at the minute. Your view then, David, is that basically, look, this and indeed any other vigils or indeed any other gatherings should be disallowed.
I think the police are in such a difficult position because with Black Lives Matter, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. I just wish people would exercise common sense sometimes.
Yeah, and this is one of the issues because as well the thing is that we did allow, didn't we, the Black Lives Matter protest, we did allow the Extinction Rebellion protests, and so essentially it seems like there's a bit of a double standard that you now have people of vigil in what is a deeply depressing case, of course, where that's the one they decide to clamp down on. It's a surprise to me that anyway. But David, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Please keep calling us. David from Bermondsey there saying that he doesn't believe that this vigil last night for Sarah Everard should have gone ahead. Of course, it's proved controversial, not just the vigil itself, but the police's response to it. Terrible optics last night from the Metropolitan Police, who decided to, quotes from an eyewitness we had on the show earlier on, Calgie from Guido Fawkes, to engage with enforcement, and actually what they did essentially was trample on some flowers that were laid out there. Sarah Everard, they were wrestling women off a bandstand and pinning them to the ground as they nicked them. It was just absolutely shocking. Calls for Cressida Dick to go. What's your view on this? At Talk Radio on Twitter is our Twitter poll. Should Cressida Dick resign? Right, now when we come back, we're going to be going through all of today's papers, and there is a lot to get stuck in with. James Bull, journalist and author of Post-Truth, is going to be joining me very shortly. Patrick Christys, Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio. On DAB and on your smart speaker. Talk Radio.
Morning, all. Loads of you getting in touch on the major story of the day, which was the disgusting scenes from our Met Police as they responded to the Sarah Everard vigil in Clapham Common last night. Cressida Dick, resign with your boss, Sadiq Khan. They're both completely useless and have created an unsafe capital for everyone. That's from Les. He tweeted us at Talk Radio. I've had a text in, text talk and your message to 87222. It's all right to take the knee to the Black Lives Matter and dance with Extinction Rebellion with their middle-class chums. The Met's disgraceful behaviour shows how hollow Cressida Dick's words were with regard to the death of that poor woman, Sarah Everard. That's from Lynn in Cardiff. Thank you very much for getting in touch, Lynn. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with the 03444991000? Lots of you getting in touch to say, actually, hang on a minute, there shouldn't have even been a vigil. Okay, we get that it's a deeply distressing and depressing issue that's taken place there, but, look, it was against the law. We're joined now for a look at all of the front pages and what's inside the books of today's national newspapers with the one, the only James Bull, journalist and author of Post-Truth. James, thank you very, very much for joining us this morning. And it's a bit of a bumper news day. Where should we begin? I think, should we start with the Sunday Times? And it is our main story of the day. Outrageous police clashes tarnish the vigil for Sarah Everard. Your thoughts?
It's a pretty amazing change between the first and the second edition of the Sunday Times. The sort of first edition had a picture of Kate, Duchess of Cambridge, laying the flowers. Could have actually been something of a healing image. Start to get towards what do we do? How do the police improve? How do they make women feel safe? And of course, in the edition that's actually hit the newsstands, you have that astonishing picture of the woman at the vigil being sort of forcibly cuffed by police. And it's just got to go down as one of the sort of worst failings of the police in recent years. It's hardly the first time the Met have had a crisis of confidence. You've got Jean-Claude de Menezes, you've got Mark Duggan, you've got Ian Tomlinson. But it just feels that on a critical week for the Met to regain the sort of trust and the confidence, especially of women, to feel that it was safe, especially when the suspect in this case is a Met officer, they could not have mismanaged this more badly than they have.
Oh, it was just absolute. To be honest with you, it's unthinkable. The idea that, this could have taken place. We've had a lot of people get in touch. Mike's tweeted in, Cressida Dick mirrors the failure across the country of weak leadership. That's certainly a view. And a lot of the papers are actually also leading in on pictures of Kate visiting the shrine, really, to Sarah Everard there and laying some flowers. And I think it's important, clearly, for her to do that, not least as well because it's good PR for her as well. I know that might sound a bit insensitive, but given everything that's gone on, of course, I've got no doubt that she wants to go and show solidarity with what is a clearly desperate issue for a poor young girl. But I think it is also good imaging for Kate as well. But just moving on, because we'll be speaking a lot about the Sarah Everard vigil that was essentially ruined by police. Let's move on to the Sun, and this is about the AstraZeneca vaccine shortfall plunging the EU into fresh chaos. Talk to me.
So the best EU country on the vaccine rollout has about a third of the number of doses given out relative to its population as is. This really has gone wrong there. And what's sort of happening is these 27 countries generally agreed to let the EU manage the rollout and try and keep it fair and distributed. And now you've got sort of 5 countries, most notably Austria, accusing their neighbours of signing side deals to get extra doses. They're having rows over the exports, and they're having a whole other row now about the safety of AstraZeneca based on some very, very thin evidence that most people seem to be saying isn't a cause for concern. And so it's the unusual position for those of us in the UK of seeing apparently us managing an aspect of corona quite well, and our near neighbours just having an absolute nightmare of it and falling out in lumps.
They are coming apart at the seams a little bit, aren't they? You're right. The Wunderkind, as he's known, Sebastian Kurz, because I believe he became the world's youngest ever elected leader. I think he was 31, I'm right in saying, when he became head of the Austrian government. Now, he has been quite outspoken on this, hasn't he? He has, as you've rightly said, they're accused now, some European Union nations, of signing these side deals with vaccine companies. So, for example, my understanding is that Malta has had 3 times the amount of doses as Bulgaria or something like this. And, Doug, do you think that essentially what's happening now with the European Union is it's making the case for itself to just not exist anymore?
So I don't think it's existential. I think what it has made the case for is, this idea of ever closer union, and they've got to always cooperate more, sort of act together on more things. I think they're probably now, a lot of them are looking and going, well, health was never part of this deal, and we're probably regretting making it on this one. Because, Malta is a tiny country. I think it's had about 70,000 doses. If you send it one shipment and it uses it well, it's going to sort of take a lead, and then other places, bigger countries, will catch up. I suspect a lot of what's going on is when there's a crisis, there's often a rush in the EU and in Europe to make sure that the blame lands on someone else's desk, and they seem to be getting very, very energetic about the blame game and less energetic about fixing it.
Yes, they've tied themselves up in knots slightly, haven't they, with who to blame, and then the quality of this jab. We didn't want the jab anyway, but actually we'd quite like it. Please stop taking our jab off us, etc., etc., etc. It's a bit of a hot mess, isn't it? But moving on now, the Mail on Sunday. BT boss Philip Janssen is hit by strike chaos. What's going on here?
So, well, it's a fairly new boss of BT, Chief Exec Philip Janssen, and he's trying to make quite a lot of cuts and get it all back around to profitability. But he's trying to do that while being responsible for trying to improve our broadband. And, we've been locked down for very nearly a year now. The anniversary is the 23rd of March. And I bet a lot of us have been absolutely cursing our internet connections, which are long overdue, this upgrade that BT's leading on with government funding. And so cutting the number of officers from 300 to 30 and sort of relying on remote work and redundancies and all of that might be great if the job was done, but it seems a little bit premature, certainly to the workers and the unions, to be looking at making these big cuts before the broadband's been improved and before the work's been done. And so there seems to be quite a lot of fights, but the aggro for a lot of us is, if you're working remotely, if you're not back in the office for a few months, if there are strikes, that could mean broadband going down and could make life very difficult for people already managing these difficult corona circumstances.
Yeah, we talk a lot, don't we, about cyber attacks and the threat that might happen. It looks like we're essentially cyber attacking ourselves here, aren't we? If we have this strike that could just knock broadband out for everyone. Terrible news for everyone on these. Although, to be fair, it would get me out of another Zoom quiz. So, there's swings and roundabouts, aren't there? Goodness gracious me. Part of me wishes Zoom had never been invented. But anyway, the Sunday Telegraph, BBC Proms accused of being embarrassed about its classical music heritage in new job advert. What on earth are they up to now?
So, well, this is one of those where you kind of can't help but roll your eyes a little bit at the BBC. I think their intentions were good here, but it feels a bit of a swing and a miss. Proms is, of course, the big classical music event. They actually do a lot more now. They do sort of jazz with it. They do more contemporary stuff. They were trying to get some people sort of from more diverse backgrounds, maybe who weren't already deeply interested in classical music, to help sort of online promotion for the proms, help get a younger audience to them. And they focused on all the stuff around the proms that isn't classical music, which is fine, but you should probably actually mention the classical music too. And they didn't at any point in the advert. And if the point is to try and get younger audiences and broader audiences to like classical, to see something in it for them, you maybe do need to at least mention it once in the advert.
Well, it'd help, wouldn't it? You'd think that's kind of rule 101, isn't it, really? If you're going to advertise something, make sure you mention what it is that you're actually advertising. This year we've got Stormzy headlining the proms for no apparent reason whatsoever. But we're just moving on and quickly because we are going to be ironically squeezed by the news now. The Observer, how fungible tokens became the latest tech speculation bubble. This sounds very complex. What is it?
This is the new Bitcoin type thing, really. It turns out there's this massive thing going on in the art world, and it's everything from Azalea Banks' sex tapes to new high-end art being sold by Christys. And it turns out someone bought an NFT, as they're called, for $67,000 in October and just sold it for $6.6 million. So it's like crypto trading cards for adults, you know, like your Panini stickers.
Yeah.
And, you could buy NBA players taking 10-second clips of when they score points and all sorts. And it's all bubbling up, and it's clearly going to end up with a lot of people paying a fortune for, the digital equivalent of a sack of magic beans. But it's one of the most bizarre things I've seen.
Oh, fantastic. Look, James, it's been an honour and a privilege to whiz through today's news with you. James Ball there, journalist and author of Post-Truth. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Mike Graham, who's in the 10 till 1 slot midweek. He's going to be having a bit of a rant about the latest bill that's gone through the Scottish Parliament now, which is essentially a hate crime bill, a freedom of speech bill. Essentially, you could be criminalised now for saying something fruity around the dinner table, which, I mean, God, lock up your grandparents, everybody. 03444991000. Text talk and your message to 87222 at Talk Radio on Twitter. We're also going to be talking to economic expert Emily Carver as UK exports to the European Union have dropped by 40%. Also, our GDP has fallen. In other news, water's wet. We've got a pandemic on. What do we think was going to happen? But Michael Johns, co-founder of the National Tea Party, is also going to be joining us. Big guest that. He's going to be whizzing us through Biden's catastrophically awful week. Your views, 03444991000. It's Patrick Christys. It's Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
The ultimate kick in the teeth, really, to our NHS heroes.
Talk Radio. On DAB and on your smart speaker. This is Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on Talk Radio. Thank you very much for everyone who's tuning in. Our big question of the show today, and we've got a poll out on this on Twitter at Talk Radio. Should Met Police Chief Christys resign? It's in relation to the absolutely shocking scenes that took place last night at the vigil for Paul Sarah Everard, where actually this was a completely peaceful situation. Loads of people just gathering to show solidarity in what is a desperately awful and sad case. And then, as we heard from a witness who was there last night, who came on at the top of the show today, the police basically over their radio said it's time to engage and enforce. I mean, what the heck do they think they're doing at? The result, essentially, women at a vigil for women's rights basically had their faces trodden into the dirt while police trampled on the flowers that were at the scene for this thing. It's just absolutely shocking. Should Cressida Dick, the Met Police Chief, go? Our poll on that at the moment is several thousand of you, 4,000 of you have taken part in this. 80% of you say yes, so pretty resounding. We're going to be going to the phones on this shortly, 03444991000. But first, ladies and gentlemen, are fast becoming a regular on this show, and of course he's got his shows 10 till 1 every single weekday. It's Mike Graham. Now, Mike, I believe that you're out in the wild again.
I'm back on the beach again this time. I'm going to give you a slightly different view, because last time we were sort of hiding from the wind by the huts, but today I thought I'd show you the actual sea in all of its entirety. What you can see behind me is Beachy Head, which is awesome looking today. It looks absolutely fantastic. The waves are crashing in, hopefully not too noisy for you, but the dog Ziggy's here, currently digging around looking for something on the beach. We don't know whether he's going to make an appearance later or not.
Good stuff. I mean, the view in the foreground isn't half bad either, Mike Graham. Fantastic to see you in the in your natural habitat in the wild. Right, look, talk to me, because the SNP have done it again, haven't they? They've outstripped themselves when it comes to absolute political lunacy. My understanding is that they've passed this contentious hate crime law. Just talk me through what it means. People are saying this is it's stunts free speech.
Well, nobody really knows exactly what it means, and that's part of the problem. I mean, Alex Massey's written a great piece in the Sunday Times today in Scotland, basically saying, not a great week, guys, for introducing a bill which actually doesn't offer any protection whatsoever for women, but does offer protection for every single other group that you can actually think of. They claim that what this law will do is to stop hate, right? The problem is that they've actually encouraged hate by setting it all up in a sort of structure. They say that they want to stop people from sort of somehow stirring up hatred, but they don't define how that is done. And when they were asked to put in a specific clause to protect women in particular, they refused. And so here we are. You're arguing about what happened last night in Clapham Common and the violence against women debate. They're not even offering protection to women in Scotland in a specific bill that offers protection to everybody else.
It's just ridiculous, isn't it? And I don't understand. I don't understand why on earth they would want to bring it in. I mean, as you said as well, it's quite vague, isn't it? You know, stirring up hatred. This could get a little bit 1984, couldn't it? All of a sudden, you find yourself being accused of stirring up hatred.
You know what it reminds me of? what it reminds me of is when I was working up in Scotland, they tried to rule on sectarianism, right? They tried to basically stop people from making sectarian chants at Celtic and Rangers games. Now, if you've ever been to a Celtic or a Rangers game, that's a bit like me trying to stop the waves coming in, you know. But they started out with this framework, which ended up saying, we will not allow sectarian images. And when they got to the point where they said that the Irish tricolour flag, the national flag of the Republic of Ireland, and the Union Jack were both sectarian images, it all started to unravel and go a bit wrong. And they had to repeal it and get rid of it. Because you're going, well, how are you going to arrest somebody for walking down the street with a Union Jack now? It's ridiculous. So the same here. They're probably going to have to repeal it because it means nothing. How are you going to walk into somebody's house and say, we've had a call from your son. We heard that you were watching an old episode of Till Death Us Do Part. And we're going to arrest you, you know, in your house.
Yeah, you know, so we saw that you might have been thinking about watching Fawlty Towers, and of course that does come with a trigger warning these days, and you cannot, under any circumstances whatsoever, watch that. This is the extension of this, though, isn't it? Can you criminalise people for saying stuff around their own dinner table? I mean, this is a bit rum, isn't it? I personally don't say racist stuff in my spare time, but you know, if somebody says things in, you know, around the dinner table or something like that, seriously, now are you just a phone call away from the police kicking your front door in?
Yeah. I mean, trust me. I mean, you might think I'm a controversialist in this one, but I don't actually get home at the weekend, sit my kids down around, you know, some shepherd's pie and go on some mad rant about why I hate transsexuals. I don't really do that normally. So, I mean, I don't really think there's any need for a law to prevent me from doing something that I don't do, you know.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? It's like, thank you very much for introducing this, but I think it's important to have some context, isn't it? Because actually, the SNP have got form when it comes to this stuff, and Hamza Yusuf is the SNP Justice Secretary. He's the one who went on that epic white rant, didn't he, when it was all about you know, Black Lives Matter, etc., etc., etc. Is there some kind of ulterior motive here, do we think? Are they trying to tag onto the woke brigade? Is this just something to say it serves no practical purpose, but they can say that they've done it, which proves once and for all that the SNP doesn't hate people?
I think the problem is that the SNP hates the English, right? Unfortunately, the English don't appear to be covered in this bill either. You know, so you can be as hateful about the English as you like, particularly standing at the border with your hands up saying, do not enter, or else we'll shoot you. You know, I mean, it really is quite ridiculous. I think it shows, though, Patrick, as well, how out of touch some of these politicians are. Because all they do is they sit around in these committee meetings where they all sort of, you know, take a tug of forelock to every single minority that you can think of, apart from the actual people of Scotland, who in a majority do not wish to leave the United Kingdom anyway, and who also could not give a stuff about protecting loads of people who to them are very much in a minority. You know, and of course there are going to be hate crimes. People are going to say things about people. People might even be discriminatory against other people. But we've already got laws that protect you from that. You know, if you're a bloke who happens to have brown skin and somebody calls you a racist name, they can be arrested for that. You know, why they have to bring this in, which, as I say, is very, very vague indeed. I mean, they've changed the definition as well from the beginning of the bill when they first drafted it. Their definition of stirring up hatred was as long as somebody thought you were stirring up hatred, that was okay. Now they've actually said it will have to be a deliberate stirring up of hatred. Now you tell me what the difference is. I don't really know.
Yeah, well, this is it. It's all subjective, isn't it? And then who makes the rules and who adjudicates this? It's not it's not as simple as it may seem. Just lastly, Mike, and I'll let you get back to what looks like an absolutely fantastic walk along the beach, I must say. Look, where are we in terms of Nicola Sturgeon potentially having to shuffle off her political coil? It's all gone a little bit. It's all gone quiet over there, to coin a football phrase. What's happening with Nicola Sturgeon? Is she? Well, the calls for her to resign they're still loud and clear, aren't they?
It looks as though that's gone away to an extent, partly because she spent 8 hours sitting in that committee room. And as it was pointed out to me, all she did for 8 hours was take 3 sips out of a glass of water. Now, that would worry me slightly if I was looking at her as a human being, because I'm worried that somebody who can do that is capable of almost anything, right? But she said literally nothing in 8 hours. She said what I could have said in about 20 seconds, which was basically, I think I might have done a few things wrongly, but I don't think I did anything terrible. Basically, I don't remember anything else. That was it. 8 hours to say that, right? The press and the media in Scotland are so supplicant to her that they haven't even bothered chasing it. John Swinney the other day, who's her deputy, got away with saying that they'd lost the minutes of a meeting. They didn't know where they were. And everyone went, oh, okay then. And it's like, you know, they seem to be able to get away with everything. So I think she will still only be unseated from within the party. And at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any appetite for that.
Yeah, look, we've got loads of callers on this. We're going to go to the phones very shortly. 03444991000. Text talking your message to 87222. Tweet us at Talk Radio and watch us on YouTube. And Mike, it's on that point. Is it possible for our YouTube viewers to get a quick look at Ziggy, who's been is he still messing around in the gravel?
Turn around and show him Ziggy.
He's have a look at Mike Graham's best mate.
He's messing around. There he is.
There
he is. He's actually my only mate, to be honest. He's the only member of the family. He's the only member of the family who looks forward to seeing me at the weekend.
Good stuff. Mike Graham, thank you very much. Always brilliant to have you on. Really appreciate you making the time for us. Always fantastic stuff. Mike Graham, tune in 10 till 1 midweek for him. Right, we're going to go to the phones. Mike, another Mike. We're back-to-back Mikes here. Mike from Uxbridge is on the line. Police were pushed by the crowd. There was always going to be trouble. Mike, is this in relation to the Sarah Everard vigil? The Met Police are copping it, for want of a better phrase, today over their handling of it and the arrests that were made. Talk to me about your view. Mike in Uxbridge. Hello, Mike. You there?
Hello. Yes.
Hi, mate. Yes. Sorry. Talk to me about your views on this vigil. Then, what are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is start off with a question. Would it have been any different whether it's a legal gathering or not? And I think not. And I've sent you this by text. I've taken it. It's from a police Facebook group from a female officer that was there. She says it started mainly only female officers overlooking a civil vigil. When numbers grew and social distancing ceased, more officers were called. When police officers tried to crowd control and remove people from stamping on flowers for Sarah, they refused. They, police officers, clearly were pushed onto the flowers, not as your previous correspondent says.
Right, so due to the crowd, they were there for. Look, you have to acknowledge though that it is a very bad look, isn't it, Mike? It looks awful, regardless of whether or not there was any kind of element of provocation from the crowd or whatever. The Met Police have allowed themselves to be photographed, kind of lying women on the floor and nicking them at a vigil for a clearly massively emotive case involving Sarah Everard. I mean, this is bad policing, isn't it?
No, it's not bad policing.
Okay.
The police were there trying to keep order. It is obvious that people turned up from Renter Mob who wanted to cause problems. And your prejudice reports in the BBC saying that policemen were holding that woman down. It was police women holding that woman down.
It doesn't really make it any different.
Unfortunately, you're not going to agree with me because you want a good story. How about telling the truth?
Well, I mean, look, I spoke to a witness, didn't I? So I did that. I spoke to a guy who was actually there at the scene. And I do appreciate your opinion, by the way, Mike. And look, I absolutely do not care one bit whether or not people call up and agree with me or disagree with me. I like having the conversation. I do wholeheartedly respect your view, Mike. And a lot of people on Twitter share your view, actually. So you are not alone. That said, they can't all be wrong. The pictures tell one story. I actually spoke to a witness as well, and clearly it does look as though the police might have overstepped the mark. Calls now for Cressida Dick to resign. I'm assuming, Mike, that you think that Cressida Dick should stay exactly where she is. She should not resign.
No, I will say I'm not impressed by Cressida Dick as the police commissioner. But what I am saying is that what happened yesterday was going to happen anyway. And there is one report that said the family didn't want the vigil to go ahead. And I think it's really, really disrespectful, having lost a daughter in the way they did, to have people jumping on the bandwagon, causing the sort of civil disorder that has happened. And God forbid any person in that crowd getting COVID and dying from it, because that is the risk they took. And the family know that. George Floyd died in America and other people died as a result of it. It is not the way to go on.
Mike, thank you very much. I appreciate you giving us your views and calling up 03444991000. Do you agree with Mike? Do you think that essentially this vigil was was hijacked, I suppose you could say, and people were jumping on the bandwagon that actually it shouldn't have taken place, and the police were well within their rights to behave in the way that they did. Your view, 03444991000. We've got Yusuf on the line, who's called up. We're going to be talking to Yusuf when we come back very, very shortly. We're also going to be joined by Emily Carver, who is a Conservative commentator and an economic expert to pick through the charred remains of our economy. It emerges that the UK exports to the European Union has dropped by 40% in January. The GDP as well fell by 2.9%. Are we in the brown stuff? 03444991000. Patrick Christys, Talk Radio. Stay tuned.
Online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
It's just been weird not to see people I haven't seen my friends for a year.
Talk Radio. On DAB and on your smart speaker. Talk Radio.
Morning all, Patrick Christys here on Talk Radio, and we're whizzing through it this morning, ladies and gentlemen. We've already tackled some of the big issues. The Sarah Everard vigil that was supposed to be cancelled but then went ahead. The police rocked up and decided to basically ruin it and allow themselves to nick people. You know, at this protest, not protest, vigil I should say. At this vigil, you know, you've got people there coming together to pay their respects in the very tragic case of Sarah Everard, of course, but also make a wider point, isn't it, that women don't feel safe on the streets and that now this feels like a movement. It feels like something might be done. What do the Met Police do? They come and just allow themselves to be photographed arresting people and rubbing women's faces into the dirt whilst they actually trample on some flowers placed in memory of Sarah Everard. I mean, a more catastrophic PR disaster you could not have wished for. Your views, 03444991000. I believe it's on this that Yusuf joins the conversation now. Yusuf, thank you very much. Yusuf in Manchester, that's my neck of the woods. Yusuf, what would you like to talk about?
It's about this vigil that happened. I have a lot of sympathy for the police, to be honest, in this situation, because they have a job to uphold the law. Now, you know, I happen to disagree with the laws that are currently in place about mass gatherings in public. And what's happened today, or perhaps it came through yesterday, is you get the likes of Priti Patel sending signals to the police, basically saying that she's unhappy with what happened. She's sending a signal to say, I want you to unevenly apply the law. If there's a cause that is, you know, popular or fashionable, don't uphold the law with them. But we're quite happy for you to, you know, drag a woman's face through the dirt if she happens to be protesting because it's been illegal for her to see her elderly mother for, you know, the last year. Drag her face through the dirt because, you know, that's politically expedient for us. And we have the mob on our side. But we don't have the mob on our side when it comes to heavy-handed policing for this sort of thing. This incident is purely being brought about because of these insane laws that we've got in place currently.
Well, that's your view, obviously, Yusuf, and I think, you know, well, you mentioned the laws, and a lot of people are saying this, aren't they? That there are laws, there are, you know, coronavirus rules and restrictions. Goodness knows we can't forget that, can we? And that actually, look, the police were essentially only trying to do their job, and you know, there is that argument. I suppose, you know, I'm essentially, my view on this is potentially on actually quite shaky ground, because I suppose what I'm asking for is for the police to have just turned a blind eye, and then, you know, you think, well, actually, you can't really say that, can you? You can't really just ask the police to turn a blind eye. I mean, that's not really how we work, is it, Yusuf? So, look, there are calls for the Met Police Chief, Cressida Dick, to go. That's our Twitter poll today. Take part in that at Talk Radio. Your thoughts on that, Yusuf? Do you think her position has now become untenable?
Not in relation to this. I think she's, you know, done what is supposed to be her job. I think it's a terrible job that we're asking police officers to do right now, and I wish more of them would stand up and say, we're not prepared to enforce this. But I'd be equally disgusted, and what I find terrifying is the idea that the police will stand up and say, well, we're not going to do it for, you know, fashionable social justice causes, but we are going to do it for the unfashionable things, because the whole purpose of a free society is that we provide protection to people with unpopular and heterodox views.
Yeah, it's a free country, as they say, and that's why I love this show as well, and I love getting people like yourself on, Yusuf, because we may well have a different opinion on this particular topic, but we can have a nice chat about it, and that's the main point here. I mean, look, the fact is, as you've rightly alluded to there, the police essentially did turn a blind eye to the Black Lives Matter protest. In fact, in front of what was, you know, a very raucous group of people outside Downing Street, right on the kind of doorstep of power. There's these iconic videos and pictures, aren't there, of police officers not only not dispersing the crowd, but taking a knee in front of them. And then you contrast that with what happened yesterday, which is an entirely peaceful vigil for a very, very tragic case of this poor girl, Sarah Everard. And at that particular moment, the police decide to get involved. It just doesn't seem to make too much sense to me, Yusuf. Yusuf, thank you very much for joining in. Great to have you on the show. Yusuf from Manchester there. coming out, actually kind of supporting the police, saying that actually, look, hang on a minute, maybe this protest shouldn't have, sorry, not protest, vigil shouldn't have taken place at all. Carl's on the line now. Carl from London. What can I do for you, Carl?
Oh, hello, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
For months on end, the message has been stay home, save lives, protect the NHS. The message, the official message of the Mayor of London has been that. The official message by Priti Patel has been that. Now, suddenly, after so many months of talking about people dying and the NHS being overrun, an illegal concentration of people takes place. It is illegal because the official advice was don't do it. Now, the Priti Patel and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, turn against the police for doing, for enforcing.
Yes, this is the news, isn't it? You're right, Carl. You're right, Carl. I'm just going to give a bit of context before I let you carry on this. You're absolutely spot on. Priti Patel has now called for a report to be sent to her from the Met Police about this. So I suppose, in a sense, you could say she's thrown them under the bus. Carry on, Carl.
But that's basically the thing. They ask the police to enforce the law, and when the police enforces the law, and people knew that it was illegal, so it was not something that happened on the spot. They knew beforehand that the gathering was not going to be allowed, and they went there. So the issue is blaming the police for doing their job. I'm highly critical of the police, but in this occasion, I fully support the police because you cannot tell them to do something to enforce the law and then turn against them when they enforce the law.
I think it was probably maybe the manner of it, though, didn't it? And I know that, someone can just take a photograph and it can look a lot worse than maybe things actually were. But we did speak to a lad who was actually present at the scene, the political reporter for Guido Fawkes, Christian Calgi, who was there. And he said, look, he was actually very, very shocked by the way that the police went about it. It did look aggressive. It did look assertive, and potentially needlessly so as well. Carl, I'm assuming that you think that Cressida Dick, the head of the Met Police, should not resign. That's our Twitter poll
She
tonight.
shouldn't resign. If you want her to resign, then you should have chosen to ask her to resign for other things that she did. But in this particular situation, they were doing their duty.
And well, look, Carl, I think it's. Go on, Carl.
Resign is Sadiq Khan should be asked to resign, and Priti Patel should be asked to resign, because otherwise there is a lockdown or not lockdown. But if there is a lockdown and they ask the police to enforce it, they cannot punish the police for doing their job.
Carl, thank you very much for joining us. 03444991000. Really interesting points there. He's banging in favour of the police. This is, of course, the news that last night the Sarah Everard vigil that wasn't supposed to be taking place, that apparently had been called off and then very much happened. Hundreds of people gathering in Clapham Common, and the police got involved, and there's potentially, anyway, some I suppose, accusations of relatively heavy-handed and needless policing. Jonathan, I believe, is on the line right now. Jonathan in Sheffield. Talk to me, Jonathan. What can I do for you?
Hi, Patrick. I'm just a bit miffed by all this, because we talk about it was a silent vigil. It was a silent vigil up to a point. And after that point, when it became a political vigil, that's when the police arrived. I mean, all day people were arriving, and there were big groups. The police wasn't around because it was a silent vigil. But as soon as the silent vigil became political, that's when the police enforced action,
So you feel, and a lot of people are commenting on this, saying that they are concerned that maybe this vigil was hijacked by people trying to make some kind of political point. Look, I wasn't there, so I can't speak with any confidence as to that. But look, in relation to this, then you're of the opinion, I'm assuming, that this vigil should not have gone ahead. Look, ultimately, no matter which way you dress it up, by definition, a vigil is a public gathering, and therefore public gatherings are illegal at the moment. As such, this vigil was illegal. So you're backing the police for the way that they behaved.
To that point, when the silent vigil became vocal, when people started spouting rhetoric, that's when I agree with the police. They should arrive and stop this, because that's when it becomes a protest, not a silent gathering for a vigil for a murdered young lady, you know. And if you look on YouTube, we watch YouTubers live stream throughout the day. Subject Access is a good one. And, you know, so like we were there watching it, really.
Right.
It was a silent vigil throughout the day up to when the speakers started to speak. And that's when the police arrived, which that should happen because that's when it becomes political and a protest and not a silent vigil.
Well, that's your view, Jonathan, and it's great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for calling in. Keep calling back as well. 03444991000. Text talk and your message to 87222. Tweet us at Talk Radio. Hi, Patrick. I'm still amazed that people have willingly given up their freedoms. Now they turn against the vigil for Sarah Everard. Don't they realise that when you give your freedoms away so easily, they won't be handed back without a fight? That's Dave in Southampton. He texted talking his message to 87222. Just going to give you the latest on our Twitter poll, which is the question for it simply. Should Met Police Chief Cressida Dick resign? This is in relation to the quite shocking, really, kind of very uneasy feeling that I have about this incident that took place last night at the vigil, where the police got involved and decided to start making arrests at the Sarah Everard vigil. 80% of you so far think that Cressida Dick should resign. Still loads of time to take part in that poll, of course. Right, stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. It's Patrick Christys on Talk Radio. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Emily Carver, who is a Conservative commentator, a fan favourite here on Talk Radio, an economic expert as well, because there's a lot to pick through. The UK exports to the European Union are down 40% in January, and UK GDP fell 2.9% as well. Is this a natural connotation to the fact that we're going through a pandemic? Is it only natural that we were going to see this, or actually are we bang in trouble? 03444 991000. Patrick Christys, Talk Radio.
Evenings with James Whale
on Talk Radio.
Keep connected with round-the-clock news, essential information and expert insight.
If you are seeking asylum, you seek asylum in the country that is closest to you, that isn't going to abuse you, as I understand it.
Cutting through the confusion with everything you need to stay safe, informed and entertained.
Just because somebody's an MP doesn't mean they always get it right.
Evenings with James Whale.
Monday to Thursday evenings from 7
on Talk Radio.
The Independent Republic of Mike Graham
on Talk Radio.
I mean, this is an absolute travesty what's going on, isn't it?
Essential information and expert insight.
I imagine there'll be plenty of people under 40 who think that she's behaving like an absolute horror and that he is a spoiled, rotten little brat.
The Independent Republic of Mike Graham.
Weekday mornings from 10 on Talk Radio. Across the UK, online, on DAB and on your smart speaker. Talk Radio.
Morning, everyone. It's Patrick Christys on Talk Radio. Thanks very much for everyone who's tuning in. Loads of you getting in touch about the Sarah Everard vigil, and that's our big issue of the day. Of course, some quite disgusting scenes from the police. I felt, anyway, a bit of a heavy-handed approach to the vigil that took place last night. Look, some people are getting in touch to say, hang on a minute, this vigil for Sarah Everard was hijacked by people making a political statement or something like that. I think when the issue itself is so intertwined with not just, of course, the very tragic circumstances of Sarah Everard's death, but also then the wider issue of women's safety, it almost inherently becomes a political point, doesn't it? It becomes a movement, I suppose, is a better way of putting it. So inherently there was going to be some political element to it. Do you think the police were too heavy-handed? Do you think Cressida Dick should go? That's our Twitter poll. 80% of you say yes. And loads of you are ringing up on this as well. So we're going to go to the phones shortly. We're going to be talking about that throughout the show. But first, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to introduce Emily Carver into the fray. Conservative commentator, economic expert, all-round lovely human. Emily, thank you for joining us. Where to start? The UK, the GDP has fallen by 2.9%, but also we've got a 40% drop in exports to the European Union. Is this actually the kind of future that Remainers told us we could expect post-Brexit? What's happening?
Well, yes, these trade figures were caused a huge amount of concern among mostly people who were already anti-Brexit. We did see a sharp fall in exports to the European Union in January, as you said, fell by 40.7% compared to December and 40% down on January last year. It's clearly not good news. But it is worth taking those figures with a little bit of a pinch of salt there. This drop is only partially due to Brexit, and there is quite a lot of evidence to show that trade volumes are rebounding, and they did so in February, as, you know, businesses begin to adapt to the new arrangements.
Yes.
So there is, you've got to take this data with a little bit of pinch of salt.
Yeah, look, how worried should we be? I mean, this seems a massive number, 40% drop in exports to the European Union. I mean, that's surely got to be awful news for our economy, hasn't it? I mean, aren't they our largest trading partner? I was quite surprised. 40% is a huge amount.
Well, it is a huge amount, but the data is showing in terms of looking at freight logistics and looking at the numbers of lorries that are now going back and forth. This is really rebounding after the disruption from the end of the transition period. But there's also a lot of other things going on. You have obviously COVID distortions from that, and you have just changes in preferences in terms of where people are buying their produce from. But of course, any additional friction to trade is not a good thing. But we should be looking at the fact that it is now recovering, and we need to be looking at the longer term impacts of Brexit, which are going to be positive in terms of trade. I mean, look at how many free trade deal agreements we've already signed, thanks to Liz Truss.
Well, I'm amazed that she didn't kind of, I was waiting for the day that it turns out Liz Truss has signed a trade deal with Mars. It seems like she's done it with absolutely everyone. I'm surprised she didn't send an envoy with that Mars rover over there, just in case they do bump into bacterial life. Liz Truss will sign them up to a watertight trade deal immediately. It seems to be the way that she's operating. It's incredible stuff.
Yeah, unsurprisingly, she is one of the top favourites among conservative voters. I think she's their favourite Secretary of State at the moment, which comes as no surprise. But also, we've got to recognise that we've already seen so many benefits from Brexit already, just with the vaccination programme. And it shouldn't really come as much surprise to people like me who've studied the EU and their decision-making processes. They're rather slow. It's far easier for nation states to go it alone and make decisions like this on their own, and respond to their own priorities rather than those of 27 other nation states. So there is positive news. In terms of the GDP, yes, we're roughly 9% below where we were January last year, but of course, again, this data that comes is old data. There's a big lag in this data, so it doesn't necessarily reflect where we are now. Hopefully the data from January was a particularly low point, if not the lowest point for the economy during the pandemic. So hopefully that's the worst we're going to get. But again, there's data to show that things have improved since even under lockdown. So, things are looking up if you want to take a positive spin. But I think the main point here is, if we want to get the economy back up and growing, we need to end the lockdown, and that will be how the economy gets growing again.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? We're all sat here going, gosh, our GDP fell by 2.9%. There's fewer trade with the European Union. We're down 40% on this, and it's all awful. And then we actually kind of have to pinch ourselves and remember, don't we, that the world stopped this time last year. And actually, maybe this has got something to do with it. I just want to look ahead a bit, really. You mentioned there that, clearly these figures are what they are at the moment, and they're not great. However, when all of this, the world is basically resetting itself at the moment economically and financially. We have got this vaccine rollout that seems to be doing outrageously well. I think 31% of our population now have been vaccinated. It's one of the few things we've done as a country too well, actually, is vaccine procurement. Now, the European Union is lagging behind in this particular case. I just wonder whether or not their economy takes a hit further down the line. Ours picks up. Is this how it's going to work? Thanks to our vaccine rollout, we'll have some kind of economic boom?
Well, it should do. Our vaccination programme is the best in Europe by far.
World leading.
And it should really enable us to get back to business as usual quicker than other countries. But of course, that relies on our politicians making the decision to ease lockdown restrictions. It's very well having the vaccination programme, but if we're not allowed to go about our daily lives, then that makes it very difficult for businesses, unsurprisingly. But it's quite interesting. In the Sunday Times today, the OBR, which is the Office for Budget Responsibility, estimated that there's about £180 billion that's been saved by households during this lockdown, with most of it just sort of sitting in bog standard bank accounts. So obviously, if we open up the economy, those lucky ones that have stored up this money and have kept their jobs and have been living more cheaply throughout the pandemic can go out and spend. And I don't know about you, but if you've been looking at, holidays in the UK or weekends away, you might have noticed that there's not much availability and the prices are sky high. So there's a lot of pent up demand there. So if we can only ease the lockdown restrictions, then hopefully we'll see the bounce back that we saw back in the summer. Because remember, when the lockdown restrictions restrictions were eased in the summer, we saw a rebound then. So that should happen again.
Yes, I'm starting to lose sympathy actually for people who are, Airbnb owners or, people who are airlines and people like that saying, we need to be bailed out. We need to be bailed out. Otherwise, the airline industry is going to go pop. And then at the very first opportunity that they get, they just rank the prices up. And now I have to remortgage my house if I want to go to Lanzarote. So I kind of, I'm starting to think actually, maybe they don't deserve a single penny, but that's a bit remiss of me, really. Emily, look, I just wanted to deviate slightly from the major topic that we got you on for, which was to essentially take a glass half full approach to our economic figures, which are pretty awful. But look, I wanted to get your take on what happened last night with the Sarah Everard vigil. The Met Police got involved. There's very much two sides to this. A lot of people are saying, hang on a minute, this vigil shouldn't have even taken place, and that it was an illegal gathering and the police were right to disperse it. Other people are saying this is catastrophically awful policing and essentially Cressida Dick should resign. What are your thoughts on it?
A difficult one, isn't it? Because arguably the police wouldn't have been acting in this way were it not for the fact that we had these laws in place that prevent people from protesting and gathering. So arguably the police were doing their job, but of course the heavy-handed actions from some of the police officers that we've seen shared around social media don't exactly show the police in a good light. And also there's been the question over the last couple of years of how police react differently depending on the political cause. But I do think it's interesting how people who were so pro this lockdown and are now suddenly, horrified that it's being enacted in this way, enforced in this way. So I do worry that the government, I hope that the government will repeal the Coronavirus Act as soon as possible, because it's just not healthy in a democracy for the government to have this much power.
Look, it's important to say the government's argument for it, and I know a lot of people are saying as well, hey, come on, we've vaccinated a third of our population and it's all going rather well. This is great. We can actually open our doors a bit sooner. The government's argument to this is that, look, we've come so far actually now, and that actually we just desperately want to avoid anything that could resemble a, goodness knows, where are we? A fourth spike, is it? A third spike? Goodness knows, I've lost count of all the spikes, but we basically don't want another spike. And so their argument is that basically we should just continue with this roadmap. They say that's the safest way to go about it, but of course it is starting to grate, isn't it? You're right, Patrick. I always love it when attacks start off with that. Thank you very, very much. You're right, Patrick. The optics of this look awful for the Met, but they are just optics. The truth is that the gathering was illegal and the participants were breaking the law. That's from Dave. Thank you very much, Dave. He texted talk in his message to 87222. Look, do you think Cressida Dick can actually survive this? Let's be honest with you. Do you think she's done quite well to actually cling on to her job so far, haven't we? We've had knife crime epidemics. We've had all sorts of stuff that she hasn't exactly covered herself in glory in. That's our Twitter poll today. Should Cressida Dick go? What are your views on that, Emily?
What are my views on that? Well, I don't know. She survived many scandals so far, so she may well stay in place. I think there is a strong argument for her to take some responsibility for this, for sure. I mean, she is the boss at the end of the day, so she should have some accountability. But, it's a really difficult one because these are the laws that are now in place and the police are enforcing them. And whether they do it in a heavy-handed way, that's a separate question. I fundamentally don't believe that these restrictions should be in place at this stage.
Emily, thank you very, very much for joining us. Great to have you on the show and to see you looking so radiant at this time on a Sunday morning as well. Emily Carver, Conservative commentator.
On DAB and on your smart speaker. Talk Radio.
Yeah, morning all. Patrick Christys here on Talk Radio. And we're going to rattle through this now. We've been talking a lot, haven't we, about this Sarah Everard vigil, that the police behaved, in my opinion anyway, rather heavy-handedly at that. And a lot of you getting in touch. We're going to go to the phones again shortly. But I want to go right across the Atlantic now and speak to Michael Johns, co-founder of the National Tea Party movement in America. Fantastic guest to have on the show here on a Sunday. Michael, thank you very, very much for joining us. It's brilliant to have you on board. Look, Joe Biden's not had a particularly great week, has he? He forgot the name of the defense secretary, forgot the name of the Pentagon, and then his dog bit someone and he's had to be deported back to Delaware or wherever the heck it's from. Talk me, how's Joe Biden getting on over there? Sleepy Joe?
Poorly so far. He arrived obviously with a great degree of questions as it related to election integrity. He had almost half this country questioning whether he belonged in the Oval Office. And then I think a lot of us kind of rolled our eyes a bit with the inaugural speech that talked of unity, and there's really been no effort at unity. Most recently, this $1.9 trillion extraordinary boondoggle expenditure that did not secure even one Republican vote in the House or Senate. And in large part, that's simply because he's not really communicating with Republicans, not really even communicating within his own party with Democrats in Congress, working very much in isolation and with great degree of support and not a lot of transparency, frankly, as far as what's going on inside the White House.
He's been signing a lot of executive orders as well, hasn't he? Which, when Donald Trump did it, that was essentially the act of a cold-hearted dictator. But now Joe Biden is doing it, and this is apparently lovely and liberal. What's going on with the executive orders stuff? I understand he's... Look, I could be wrong on this. You will know better than me. I mean, he's signed more than Trump already, I think, hasn't he?
Yeah, and you look at these orders, they're executive orders in large part because there's no way you would get Congress on board for most of these items. And, in fairness, I mean, Trump signed a good number of them as well when he came in. But you look at the agenda here, and it's really created this border crisis that we're now confronting, which essentially is, looking at like hundreds of thousands of illegals that are entering the U.S., not being tested with COVID, immensely economically pressing, no real background on most of these people. We're through that debate in 2016, and we're right back into recreating a crisis that finally had been stabilized. And then some really peculiar things like lifting a ban on China's investment in our electrical grid, which was a security measure Trump, kind of properly took. It's very peculiar, I think, for a lot looking in from the outside to understand how that becomes one of your first items of action upon arriving in the White House. It means you've given a lot of forethought to it. Yeah. It's very difficult to see any upside to it.
Yeah, look, I understand what you're saying. We are a nation of animal lovers. We did a big section yesterday on my show about dogs and specifically people clamping down on dog napping. I understand that Joe Biden hasn't had a particularly great week of it in relation to his pooch, has he? What actually happened? I understand that there was a bit of a fracas involving his furry friend, wasn't there?
Looks like it, a little bit of a snap there. He's maybe not walking as fast. Biden's not.
Is this major? You see, one thing. Can I just say, without wanting to sound deeply patronising, which is normally the thing that someone says before they say something deeply patronising. But I love the fact that the names that Americans give to their pets. Over here, we have dogs that are like, oh, little Trini or something. Over in America, it's Major. They're fantastic names. I think Troy.
We still have a little bit of the ruggedness, I guess. Left in us,
Rex, fantastic. Over here we've got Dottie. Anyway, sorry, we digress. Joe Biden's dog bit someone, didn't it?
Yeah. So looks like that's it. Not even a whole lot of information about the dogs, really, which a lot of us were pointing out kind of how the last few weeks, this 1.9 trillion was such an extraordinary policy undertaking, and even on this cancel culture with the Dr. Seuss thing and whatnot.
Yeah, what the heck is that about?
Well, it's, in my judgment, it's about a lot of things. It's about restructuring and getting rid of a lot of the foundational sort of documents and culture of this country. But it also is sort of a distraction in the way that, while we're looking over here at these issues, we have this extraordinary hundreds of billions of dollars now being put into teachers' unions, no clear idea of how it's supposed to be spent, money left over from the last allocation that hasn't even been spent yet. So, I mean, to answer your broad question, this administration is off to a very poor start, and he was on shaky ground to begin with. I look, if you look at these Gallup polls on past presidents, on how far they've fallen in popularity, Carter went all the way down to 30-some%.
Yeah.
I think this is the first president we've had since Carter who doesn't have a safe buffer zone of support that really can secure him at any point above that, meaning that he could fall mighty far.
Yeah, look, and again, I know, I don't want to seem like I'm being mean on old Joe Biden here, but there was this week again. He forgot. It appeared anyway that he forgot the name of his defense secretary, forgot the name of the Pentagon, and then essentially forgot exactly how to leave the room that he was in. He kind of stood there and looked around a bit vacantly, and I just wonder how long it is before actually Joe Biden is just found wandering the front lawn of the White House, trying to cut it with nail scissors, wearing nothing but an open dressing gown. But
it's a serious matter. It's a serious matter. And I think it's one that, frankly, we can have a certain degree of empathy with. It's not one I think any of us should make fun of or whatnot.
No.
On the other
He's
hand,
knocking on a bit, isn't he?
We're not getting the full. On the other hand, we're sort of due the full story. I mean, because quite clearly, to state the obvious, something is not right.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And I think as well, look, we shouldn't. The difficulty that I have with this is that when you become president of America, you kind of. Those kind of questions become fair game, don't they? Because of the nature of who you are and what you do and what powers that you have. Thank you very much, Michael. I'm sorry about this. We're going to be squeezed by the news, but great to have you on. Michael Johns there, excellent guest, co-founder of the National Tea Party Movement. You can join in our discussion 03444991000. The big topic of today is, should Cressida Dick resign, the head of the Met Police? This is in relation to the Metropolitan Police's actions at the Sarah Everard vigil last night. Arrests made, and it looked very heavy-handed. Videos emerging of them pushing and shoving these people at the vigil. We're also going to be giving you now the latest on the coronavirus crisis with Christopher Snowdon. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker.
If we can keep going at the pace we can, then we can make sure all the over 50s get the offer of a vaccine by May.
Talk Radio. On DAB and on your smart speaker. This is Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on Talk Radio. I'm with you for the next hour before I hand over to the man himself, Bob Mills. He'll no doubt have an action-packed and fun-filled show for you from 1 until 4 o'clock. Loads of you getting in touch with us, and it's great to have your views here on Talk Radio, the home of common sense, the home of free speech, on what is a very distressing and certainly very controversial topic, which is what we're hinging the show on today, which is whether or not Cressida Dick should resign, the head of the Met Police, should resign over the Met handling of this Sarah Everard vigil. We spoke quite powerfully, actually, to a gentleman called Christian Calgie, who happens to be Guido Fawkes' main correspondent, but he also crucially happened to be at the vigil, and he said that he overheard on the police radios this was a perfectly peaceful situation. According to him, there was no trouble whatsoever. Everyone was just going about their business and paying their respects, I suppose, albeit illegally. Let's be honest, there is that, isn't there? There is an illegal gathering based around the coronavirus restrictions. But he said that he overheard on the police radio that they said, right, it's time to engage. And before you know it, we see these catastrophic images, don't we, of women being dragged away from a bandstand, all of this. Why on earth did any of this happen? It's just starting to wonder, really, who's pulling the strings there with the police. But ultimately, it's Cressida Dick. In the poll that we've got so far, 82% of you think Cressida Dick should resign. Your thoughts, 03444991000. But from what is undoubtedly very depressing and controversial news to something good, frankly. Britain has done something very, very well, ladies and gentlemen. And that relates to our coronavirus vaccine rollout. And the latest figures on this are that now over a third of our population have been vaccinated. The efficacy of these vaccines is absolutely fantastic. We're running rings around the European Union when it comes to the vaccine rollout as well. It looks as though kids going back to school hasn't, as yet anyway, been an unmitigated disaster, which I think you'd have got long odds on. Christopher Snowdon is on the line right now, head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Thank you very, very much for joining us, Christopher. Great to have you on. A lot of people will be saying, hey, hang on a minute, we're vaccinating people at a rate of knots. We might be about to vaccinate 1 million people a day, apparently, in the coming month. Isn't it time, surely, that we just unlocked? What are we all waiting for?
I think we're waiting for three things. One is we want to make sure that we don't get a virus-resistant mutation, and linked to that, secondly, we want to make sure we've got the case numbers down. Getting the case numbers down, of course, makes that less likely. You also want to get case numbers down anyway, because even though so many people have been vaccinated, if you've got still most of the under 50s unvaccinated, you could very quickly have an epidemic amongst that age group that could go up to other age groups. And thirdly, you've already mentioned the schools, but yeah, we do need to keep an eye on that. It is, of course, quite possible that there will be a surge in cases from schools. I'm a bit sceptical about that, particularly with primary schools, but it's certainly worth waiting 2 or 3 weeks. But by the end of this month, we will know about that. I think the idea that it takes 5 weeks to make a decision about everything is just an arbitrary claim made up by the government to try and slow things down. I think by the end of this month, assuming case numbers continue to decline, hospitalizations continue to decline, and we carry on the vaccination program at the rate that we're looking to do it, then I really think that we can move the whole thing forward by about 4 weeks. In other words, the things that we were planning to do in mid-May, I think we can probably actually do in mid-April.
Well, look, this is the news as well, isn't it, that was doing the rounds in the Times yesterday, which is that Britain is set to give the COVID vaccines to all adults by early June. And this will be the key, won't it, now, to unlocking our economy and getting back to it. There were the economic figures which look for a layman like me anyway, looked pretty catastrophic when I saw that trade with the EU, or exports to the EU, was down 40%. I think GDP was down 2.9%. I believe I'm right in saying that. This looked awful, but crucially, are we actually kind of just approaching the light at the end of the tunnel now? Once we get all these adults vaccinated by early June, we will start to see those figures going north.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to wait for that. I mean, the only justification for lockdown, which I have gone along with, and which the government gave us a year ago, was to protect the NHS, to stop the NHS being in a position where it can't treat people. And, of course, a big resurgence could put us in that situation again, but we don't need to vaccinate every adult to get to that state. Once we've got everyone under the age of 50, I don't think there's any realistic chance of the hospitals being under that kind of stress. Although, of course, some people will still get the virus and some sadly will die. But we can't lock down just on the basis of that. You have to remember, the first lockdown, which we panicked very much about, and we didn't know what we were doing, and we didn't have a vaccine, and the vast majority of people were susceptible to the virus. It lasted 3.5 months. I think probably went on a bit too long, but it lasted 3.5 months. This one looks like lasting 5 months with a vaccine, with far fewer people susceptible to it. So you can make the case that if we didn't have a vaccine, we'd be ending this lockdown quicker than otherwise, and that doesn't seem to make any sense to me. The economic damage is kind of exponential at this point. It does get much worse. I think you're getting sort of diminishing health returns from every day of extra lockdown, but exponential harm in terms of both the social impacts, people's loneliness and general misery, but also the very severe economic impact, both to the public finances and to the broader economy.
Yeah, and some other news as well on this is that vaccine teams to go to maximum capacity. It's like DEFCON 1, isn't it? We're going to start double jabbing people, apparently. This is the news that's doing the rounds at the moment, which is that frontline COVID-19 vaccination staff are on standby to go to maximum capacity and inoculate twice as many people from next week. Look, this has been an absolute national triumph, hasn't it? I mean, not forget, there were mistakes that were made. I think the care home crisis, that's an absolute scandal as far as I was concerned at the start of this pandemic, and I imagine that that's the type of thing that an inquest will go into as and when we get round to it. However, this is an absolute triumph, what we're doing at the moment, and this is testament to what we can achieve as a nation. Do you hope maybe that the vaccine rollout, and assuming it continues to go well, can actually just tell us now, let's not be afraid to be positive about Britain. For ages, we've been talking ourselves down and criticising ourselves and trying to, denigrate our history and all this stuff. Actually, now, hang on a minute, can't we hold our heads high and actually have some national pride over this?
Yes, I think we can, and I think people will be fairly cheerful once this is all over, partly for that reason. It has been pretty much the only positive to take out of this whole experience from a British point of view. But yeah, British science is fantastic. The NHS and the Army and everybody who's been delivering the vaccine have done a great job. We can be very happy about that. But we're not yielding the rewards. Other countries that are doing less well have got more freedom than us, and will continue to have probably for the next couple of months. If we're going to look at data rather than dates, we need to be looking both at the fact that the vaccine is much more successful and has been rolled out much more quickly than all the models suggested and predicted, but also look at Israel. Israel started unlocking over a month ago. It's more or less completely unlocked now. They've continued to see cases down, hospitalizations greatly down. So we do need to just kind of look around us, look around the world, in a way, because we're so far ahead of most of the world with the vaccinations. We are part of a kind of experiment. There is need for caution. Don't get me wrong. There's absolutely a need for caution. But I think really we need to be in a sort of a tier 1 situation. By the end of this month, pretty much the entire country will have been eligible for tier 1 under the old system. I think that's where we need to be. Rule of 6, but things basically open again, indoors and out.
Very interesting points. Thank you very much, Christopher. Great to have somebody on with your depth of knowledge on these issues. Christopher Snowden, there, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Just reacting, really, to, I suppose, the variety of different, all of which positive, by the way, which makes a change, news of our coronavirus vaccine rollout. We're stepping up now to maximum capacity. Apparently, we could have every single adult vaccinated by June. We might be able to do 1 million people a day, for goodness sake, and the efficacy of the vaccines as well. It's pretty good. So, you know what? We did all right there, people. 03444991000. Text talk and your message to 87222. Tweet us at Talk Radio. Watch us, of course, on YouTube as well. You can have the pleasure, or otherwise, of seeing my face. Jamie's on the line now. Jamie, what would you like to talk about?
Yeah, well, it's just about the vigil that went on.
Yes.
And people calling for the police to resign. And I think it's bang out of order because they was told by the police and by the family not to attend. If they had any respect for the family, what they're going through, they wouldn't have attended. It was just another one of these deliberate acts by the woke left to incite this kind of reaction from the police. That's what they want. So why should you bow to them every time something, the police got a bit heavy-handed? That's probably going to happen. They probably wanted that to happen. Really.
I suppose that's the argument, isn't it, really? Which is that, look, you can't get around the fact that this is an illegal gathering. I mean, this is what it is, although there's an explanation for that and why some people would argue that it maybe should have been allowed to go ahead, of course, highlighting issues about women's safety and whether or not that's an issue that we should be raising. But I suppose the question is, the police did look a bit heavy-handed. I mean, there's some videos going around of them very much forcefully shoving these protesters. Did they need to do it that way?
They're just doing their job. These people get thrown into this stuff every day. If you as a police officer, how are you going to deal with these kind of situations, especially when they're being encouraged by these kind of people? They want that reaction. So I don't blame the police at all. I hate to have their job right now. It's a horrible job to do with this kind of stuff going on. And over the years, since you've grown up, how many people has this happened to? Been murdered and stuff like this. No one's ever turned up like this and done this. It's because it's fashion at the moment. It's cool to do it. And that's why they're doing it,
Well, it's an interesting view. I mean, you're obviously therefore on the grounds that they should definitely not be resigning. This is Cressida Dick. This is our Twitter poll. Of course, 85% of people think that she should resign. This is in relation to the police's handling of the Sarah Everard vigil last night. Jamie, thank you very, very much for coming on the line. It's great to have your views here on Talk Radio, and make sure you keep calling us back. 03444 991 Text Talk and your message 87222. Tweet us at Talk Radio. The phone lines are lighting up. We'll be going to those again shortly. We're also, later on this hour, we've got a very special guest on, actually. Andy Ngo, who's a journalist and author. Now, you may have heard this week that the Mumford & Sons guitarist Winston Marshall was taking time to examine blind spots in his psyche after praising Andy Ngo's Unmasked book. Andy Ngo's desire is to try to pick apart the Antifa and the woke lot and that kind of crew there. And basically what happened was Winston Marshall expressed some support for it. He said it was an important book and that Andy Ngo was a brave man, and then his band kicked him out of the band, for goodness sake. We're going to be talking about this, but also just cancel culture in general and whether or not free speech is actually dead. 03444 991 is that number. When we come back, we're going to be going to the phone. Stay tuned. It's Patrick Christys.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker.
The whole country can take another step on the long and hard road back to normality.
Talk Radio. On DAB and on your smart speaker. Talk Radio.
Yes, afternoon everybody. Patrick Christys, Talk Radio. Now we're going to go to the phones. 03444 991 There's kind of one hot topic in town, and it's a very unfortunate hot topic in town, of course, which is the tragic case of Sarah Everard. The news that broke yesterday was that a Serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with kidnap and murder in relation to that case. He appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court yesterday. I understand he's been kept in prison on remand, and he's going to be appearing at the Old Bailey on Tuesday, is my understanding of it. And yesterday there was a vigil, wasn't there? A vigil for Sarah Everard in Clapham Common. Now, this vigil was cancelled originally by the organisers. The Met Police came and gave a statement, which we read out live on air yesterday, thanking everybody for not attending this vigil, thanking them in advance for cancelling it, saying that, look, there are coronavirus laws and rules in place. But then, of course, the vigil naturally took place anyway, and hundreds of people gathered, probably if not thousands actually, gathered in Clapham Common. And then the police got involved. And look, there was a lot of discrepancy on this. And the head of the Met Police, Cressida Dick, there are calls now, strong calls, serious calls for her to resign over the conduct of the Met Police officers who were facing accusations of being too heavy-handed. The flip side of it is a lot of people are getting in touch to say they feel as though this vigil might have been hijacked by people with more of a political motive, and that potentially there was an element of rabble-rousing. I mean, that's not the case, according to the eyewitness that we had at the scene there, but your views are important. 03444 991 and James is on the line now. James in Cheshire. Thank you very much for calling in, James. What would you like to talk about?
Hi, thank you for having me on.
That's right.
I think the police were heavy-handed, and I think the way they acted was disgusting. There was no need for the way they went in. Now, I appreciate the point where the people may have gathered illegally. I could appreciate that. But, there's been lots of events. There's been people having illegal clubs, going to rave. There was a thing in Bristol when the protesters pulled down the statue.
Yeah.
And the police didn't get involved. So now you can argue, well, why didn't they? Because, all right, I mean, I am actually, morally, I support the protesters who put the statue down, by the way.
The Black Lives Matter protesters, yeah.
Yes, it was. Morally speaking, I'm on their side. But they broke the law. Okay, so they broke the law, and then some other people broke the law. But the people I seen on the television, they were, and I'm not being sexist here, but I seen one lady, generally speaking, men are stronger than women. Generally speaking, I'm sorry, that's the truth. I know we live in a society where you can't say that because people say, but in reality it is. The way they handled those ladies was disgusting, and it was wrong. There should have been something in place. There was no need to do it like the way they did. I don't believe they were acting violently. I can't say. I've did a little bit of research before I came onto your show because I do like listening to you. First time I've called you, but I've
well, keep calling, mate. It's great to have you on. Go on, carry on. What's your research all about?
So I looked into to see if there was rebel rousing, to see if there was any trouble, to see if there was a justification for what the police did. But I can't find any, and I'm quite good at research. So the ladies were there. It was a very sensitive thing. I mean, I can't imagine what Sarah's family are going through. The way they were handled was disgusting. Can you imagine, just for a second, if that had been a group of 50 or 60 big, strong men? Do you think that would have happened? That's a question for you, please.
Look, it is an interesting point, that, James. It is a very interesting point. And you know, I feel deeply uncomfortable. I felt deeply uncomfortable about it. And I just couldn't believe it was happening. I was on Twitter now, which is where you get everything. It's life now, isn't it, Twitter? And I was just on there and I watched these first videos starting to drop of essentially the police action there. And I was like, have they lost it? Have they gone insane? Why on earth would you be allowed to be put in a situation where you can be filmed and videoed and photographed nicking people in a very heavy-handed sense at something so, you know, I suppose important and powerful, which is this vigil for the very tragic case of Sarah Everard? I mean, the optics on it are absolutely shocking. Do you think that this is so awful, James, that the head of the Met Police should go?
Yes, I think to answer my question before, if that had been a group of 40 or 60 big, strong men, do you think the police would have acted the same way?
No, probably not. I don't
think they would. I mean, yeah, I think she should go. I think she should. Yes, I think she should, and I think maybe officers there should be disciplined or whatever it is. But I don't think it should be one person because, you know, I think it was the way they all acted, where the person in charge, she should be fired, she should apologise, and maybe the police officers, maybe they should be disciplined or retrained in some way.
Are we on slightly shaky ground in the sense that this is an illegal gathering because of the laws? So there's that side of it, isn't there? Which is, I think, essentially what you and I might be asking for is for the police to have turned a blind eye, and there's issues with that, isn't there?
No, I didn't say that at all.
No, I'm saying it.
No, you shouldn't have turned a blind eye. You should have turned up, and there would have been a better way of handling it. Once again, if that had been 50 or 60 big, strong lads, big, strong men, they would have handled it differently. There was no need. I mean, again, the thing where they broke down the statue in Bristol, when they've had illegal raves in Liverpool, there's the situations when they haven't done that. So you have to ask yourself, you have to weigh it up on this. I'm not saying you should turn a blind eye to it. No, the law is law, and I respect that. But there should have been a better way. I mean, they're supposed to be professionally trained policemen, and there's a case to argue there. Did they commit assault? You know, and the way I've seen it, I'd say, I mean, unfortunately in law there's the term reasonable force, and that you can't really nail that down.
Yeah, well, that's what they'll argue. But look, James, fantastic call. Thank you very, very much. I could talk to you all day, but we have got some other people hanging on the line. So, James, I know you said it was your first time calling in. Make sure you make it a habit now. 03444 99 1000. John is there. John, what would you like to talk about?
Hello, Patrick. How are you doing?
Hi, John. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I watched this event from the evening on an independent live stream. There was many. And my take on it and what I saw was basically a peaceful, dignified vigil hijacked later on by individuals who were basically a deranged mob. They were screaming, shouting. They were standing on the flowers that were laid earlier. There was enormous abuse hurled at the police. F this, F that, we don't want you. Honestly, the police stood there and they took unbelievable verbal, and they were pushing the police. And then when the police reacted, All the photographs were taken. I mean, when you have a melee, some people do get caught up in it who don't want to be caught up in it or whatever. But I'm telling you now, I watched this live, and it was peaceful and it was dignified, and then it was hijacked by certain groups. We know who they are, and they use this template. They use it in BLM, and they used it at this yesterday, and I find it disgusting. It really was.
So do you think that this vigil just should not have taken place at all then?
Oh, that's very difficult. You know, people want to pay respects. I mean, I suppose we've got to follow the law with COVID, but I find that one very difficult. I'm on the fence with that, I really am. But what happened with the police, they were pushing at them, they were screaming like a deranged mob later on, and all sorts of obscenities, both political and otherwise. That's really what did go on. And I was quite impressed, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, that I think it was Boris Johnson or Priti Patel said that they were going to have a probe or an investigation into far-left infiltration of these types of groups and what happens at these type of events. I would encourage that, because these are adjunct provocateurs. They really are.
Look, it's a common view, John. I must say, we've had a lot of people getting in touch on this. Why would the police have come down so hard on this vigil/protest, apparently unprovoked? It makes no sense at all. It seems the police can't win, whatever they do. That's from Mike, who texted talk, and his message to 87222. John, I really appreciate you getting in touch with us. Thank you very, very much for giving us your views. Very interesting take. Matt is on the line. Matt from Weston-super-Mare. You are tired of the double standards when it comes to these demonstrations, Matt. Talk to me.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon.
Afternoon, mate.
Firstly, you know, the killing of this young girl, absolutely disgusting, and it's awful. But there's no grey area here. It's black or white. It's either legal or it's illegal. You can't have it both ways. You know, everybody for over a year now has been sticking to the rules, or the majority of people have been sticking to the rules, staying at home. You know, both my businesses have been shut for over a year. You know, financially I've taken a massive hit, but I'm doing it for the greater good, because this is the right thing to do. So you can't, you know, you can't have it both ways. It's either legal or illegal. Like I said, don't get me wrong, it's a terrible, terrible thing, and it should never have happened. But, you know...
I suppose the argument is that the precedent has been set. We did have Black Lives Matter protests. They were right up and down the country, and we did have Extinction Rebellion protests. And in that situation, the police were content to let it happen.
That should have been shut down in the same way. You know, but because the police didn't want to be tarred with the racism brush, they've let it happen. They've let it go ahead. So the police are responsible for that. They should have stepped in, because it's either legal or illegal. You know, it's black or white. You can either meet and gather, or you can't meet and gather.
Well, you can't meet and gather, can you? That's the law. That is the law.
Exactly. And the people that wanted to go to this vigil were told in advance, please do not attend.
Well, they actually cancelled it. The organisers of this event did actually cancel the vigil, and the Met Police thanked them for cancelling it, and then a load of people rocked up anyway, didn't they? So
exactly. I'm getting more and more frustrated with the double standards. It's okay to do one thing, but it isn't okay to do anything. If I open up my business tomorrow, I will be shut down and I will be fined. So like. Honestly.
Look, I really appreciate you coming on, Matt, and it's a popular view. What's your view on this? 03444991000. It really has split people, actually. A lot of you are saying, well, hang on a minute, this demonstration, this vigil, whatever you want to call it, was just fundamentally illegal, and therefore we're putting our police in a very difficult situation. Sol's been in touch on the text. Hi, Patrick, great show as usual. Cheers, Sol. What are we expecting the police to do in situations like this? Talk to the crowd in a polite and calm manner. The police say, please don't do this anymore. Please go home. The crowd ignores the police or replies with foul language. Police say, oh, well, guess we better get back to the station. We gave it our best shot. No, of course, he's making the point there, essentially, what on earth do you expect the police to do? Their job is to enforce the law, isn't it? And in this case, the law is that you cannot have mass public gatherings, of which this vigil, however, important anyway, the meaning behind it was a mass public gathering, and therefore it is illegal. Were the police right to behave the way that they did? However, that said, 85% of you on our Twitter poll think Cressida Dick, the head of the Met Police, should resign over the police's conduct last night. So a range of views. 03444991000. When we come back, we're going to be joined, ladies and gentlemen, by Andy Ngo, who's one of the most provocative, I suppose controversial, I don't know whether he intends to be controversial, that's just the nature of who he is, journalists and authors, Andy Ngo. He's been in the news this week after the Mumford & Sons guitarist was eventually kicked out of his own band by his bandmates for daring to read a book. This ties into wider cancel culture. We're going to branch it out and not just dwell on that particular issue. We're going to branch it out to wider cancel culture and where we're at. This is Patrick Christys. This is Talk Radio. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here. I'll be joining you for the next half an hour or so before I hand over to the expert that is Bob Mills, who'll be with you through 1 until 4 p.m. Now, on the line, we've got a very special guest. It's Andy Ngo, who you will know as, well, no doubt you will know him. You'll have seen him pop up on your television screens. He's an author of a New York Times bestseller, the book Unmasked. He's also editor-at-large, I love that title, editor-at-large, of The Post-Millennial, which is news, analysis and opinions from Canada, US, the world. Now, Andy Ngo was in the news this week, or rather accidentally, I think, anyway, because the guitarist of Mumford & Sons, Winston Marshall, essentially dared to read his book and then praised Andy for it, and then his bandmates decided that he must indeed be cancelled because they can't have this kind of toxic reading in their band. I just want to branch it out a bit, really, because that particular element of it has been covered to death. I just want to talk about the wider cancel culture elements of it. And Andy, thank you very, very much for joining us. I believe our YouTube viewers have the pleasure of viewing you now on YouTube, so thank you very much. Where are we in terms of cancel culture? Because you now, essentially, I don't know whether or not you intended this, I'm assuming you didn't. The only thing that you need to do to get cancelled now is essentially read your book. Did you ever imagine that one day you could essentially become so accidentally toxic for people? It's just nuts, isn't it?
I think I learned pretty early on when I was in journalism that if you dare to challenge certain orthodoxies within journalism, such for me, my sin was to look into far left and hard left extremism. That first makes you persona non grata with your colleagues, and then eventually a subject for assault, as has happened with me in my coverage of Antifa. And as I'm learning now, people who dare to read or look into my work themselves can stand to lose everything, depending on what profession they're in.
And this is a concerning moment, I feel, in British history. Where do you think we're headed? Because, you know, it's always easier for people. It's always easier for people who don't live and breathe news or live and breathe politics or live and breathe journalism like, I dare say, you and I do. It's always easier for most people who just, you know, work in middle management at a company in Slough to just not have a view and to just toe the general line and not deviate from the kind of the group think, the kind of average mentality. I mean, do you think that this is just becoming endemic now, and actually we are literally witnessing essentially thought police taking place at the moment? You are not allowed to think a certain way, and if you do, you will be cancelled.
So this is being described a lot as cancel culture. I don't think that term it encapsulates really what's going on. It's a similar issue I have with the term woke or wokeness, wokery. Dealing with a culture, particularly in the US, but also it's in fact, as you said a moment ago, wrong thing. You can look at the history of the 20th century. So in communist East Germany, it was done from the top down, where there was a huge apparatus of hundreds of thousands of spies spying on.
Oh, it's a real shame, this, Andy. I'm really, really sorry. I know that you've made time for us, and I believe that you've, because of the time difference as well in America, you've actually gone out of your way to get live on the show. But unfortunately, that phone signal's just not holding up. I'm really sorry about this, Andy. I think we're going to have to let you get going, I'm afraid. But we will desperately do our best to try and get you back on at some point going forward. That's a real shame. Andy Ngo, ladies and gentlemen, journalist and author, just reacting to the latest, I suppose, on cancel culture and what's going on. But on the line right now is Catherine in Devon. Thank you very much for calling us, Catherine. What would you like to talk about?
Hi, Patrick. I just wanted to talk about the vigil and the case. I've not Paul, there's so much that I've wanted to say over the last week about the whole thing, but I've held off because it's so close to the whole thing happening.
We can't talk about the case, I'm afraid. We're not allowed
I'm not going
to talk about the case.
I'm talking about the family, but I'm just saying it just happened. This girl has lost her life, this woman has lost her life, and the family requested that the vigil did not take place. And so that's the bottom line for me. There's nothing else is relevant as far as
it's the fact that you're right. I was live on air yesterday, and there was this vigil that was going to take place, and then the organisers came out and said that we're not doing it anymore. Then the Met Police issued a statement thanking them for not doing it anymore. And so, I suppose when you look at it, you think, well, the organisers of this vigil decided that it shouldn't go ahead, and then the family of Sarah Everard said that they didn't want it to go ahead, and then hundreds of people did gather, didn't they? And then are they surprised when the police start arresting them? I suppose the big question is the nature of the way that the police acted. It did seem a bit heavy-handed, didn't it?
Yeah, I didn't actually watch it. I haven't seen it, so I don't have any comment on that. It's simply, and the other thing is just about how much kind of noise it's generated in the media and obviously on social media since. I mean, she was to be bluntly, she was still with us 11 days ago. This is they've had no space, the family. The entire country has been sort of on one about this. And
well, it's a massive issue, isn't it? I mean, it has raised the big burning question, which is are women safe on our streets? I suppose, Catherine. That's it.
We can have that conversation, but I think we should have it in maybe a couple of weeks or just a little while to give the family some space. That's what
No, I think it's a really, really interesting point, and potentially in all of this, it's easy to actually forget the family, isn't it? It becomes part of a much wider cause, and actually there must be some desperately, upset and devastated family members out there, of course, and they actually did not want this to go ahead. Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine from Devon, 03444991000 is that number. We're staying in Devon. We're staying with Judy. Judy, what would you like to talk to me about? How are you?
Hi. I'm just getting more and more angry the more I'm listening to people saying how dreadfully these women were treated. I'll be honest with you, I've only seen a little bit of it. I don't know how heavy-handed the police were with them, but it was illegal. They shouldn't have been there. But I blame Cressida Dick, but not for last night. I blame her for not clamping down a year ago when the BLM marches and the XR protests happened then. It should have been done then, and then people wouldn't be seeing a double standard now, because that's what it looks like. It looks like one lot are being treated different to another lot. And that was because they didn't clamp down on the original marches.
Do you think they've made a rod for their own back, haven't they? Because
yes,
once you decide that you're going to stand in front of Downing Street and take a knee and essentially turn a blind eye to people graffitiing the cenotaph, all of this stuff, and then, they must understand how catastrophically awful it looks when you then decide to enforce the law at a vigil for a deceased woman, which is of course part of a now wider campaign, isn't it, about women's safety? I mean, when you decide that you're going to enforce the law there and not in other situations, as you've rightly said, Judy, it is a double standard, isn't it?
And I mean, I told your researcher, I used to go on animal rights marches in the 80s. And every single weekend, Saturdays, Sundays, we were going on a march somewhere in the country. And you always got anarchists join the march. That was just part and parcel of going on a protest. The police knew exactly who they were, and immediately they'd start any trouble, they jumped on them, literally jumped on them, got hold of them, dragged them out, and you didn't see them again. And the rest of us would carry on and then go home, at the end of the protest. Eventually it got that they were arresting people before we actually got to do anything. So in the end it didn't become, it was worthless going on marches because the intelligence was so good. They would actually arrest the organisers before they'd left their houses. So, I do know what it's like to be on a march. I have seen heavy-handed policing. I have seen that. But I'm afraid that last night culminated because of a year ago, the police in Bristol stood there watching people vandalising property, public property, and they said, well, You know, we'll just let it go and let them get there. And it went on from there. It was the worst decision that anyone could have made, that was. And apart from that, look, I understand people wanting to have a vigil, but what is it going to achieve?
Look, I think there's a lot at play here. I think as well we have to factor in the fact that we've all essentially been trapped under lockdown restrictions for however long, and we've not had any human interaction or all this stuff. And I think that added to the sense of people wanting to come together as well. And who can blame them in that sense? But of course it is illegal, essentially. So you can definitely, there's definitely another side to it, isn't there? Judy, thank you very, very much for your views on this. And that was Judy from Devon there. She called in on 03444991000. Great to have you on the show. Right, when we come back, we're going to be whizzing you through all the latest entertainment news with Johnny Seifert, Talk Radio showbiz editor. Don't go anywhere. It's Patrick Christys on Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB and on your smart speaker. Talk Radio. On DAB and on your smart speaker. Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys. This show has absolutely whizzed by, hasn't it? But we're going to be handing over to Bob Mills shortly. But first, it's time to introduce Johnny Seifert, Talk Radio showbiz editor. Thank you very, very much for joining us, Johnny. Now you're going to be talking us through, I believe anyway, what we can watch this week in the world of show business and television. And on my list here now, no one could ever accuse you of being too thorough in your notes. It just says Dawn French plays with Lego. What have we got here? Fantastic.
I did give you a link, mate. You could have gone and clicked the hyperlink. It'll take you to what they call an article online. It's from the Sun Online, Britain's best newspaper. You'd have gone there. You'd have seen a nice picture of Dawn French. Then you'd have seen her in a picture in the Vic of Dibley. What's your excuse, my friend?
A fundamental lack of preparation and effort. So, you know, the usual. But no, go on, talk us through it. What's she doing?
I just really like this story. Dawn French likes playing with Lego. David Beckham likes playing with Lego. This has been the year where celebrities and the like, we've all just gone, look, we just need things to diversify from just using the media. You know, we're so consumed now with the TV, with our computers, with our phones. And, you know, pre-COVID, we would have been on the train and would have had that time away from the screen. So a lot of people are now playing with Lego or doing their colouring's in or doing puzzles. And I think Lego is this new way. We've not really heard about people doing Lego thus far. And now everyone's doing it. So it's the new bandwagon. You've got to be in it to win it. And if you've not played with Lego, you've got to do it now and be pretend you're a child again.
I think the Lego thing is standing on it, isn't it? That's the thing. You know, you're already on the edge. Maybe you're running late for something, you know, and there's been a couple of issues around the house. You can't find your keys, and it's standing on that piece of Lego that flips you over the edge once and for all, isn't it? Victoria Derbyshire for Good Morning Britain. Is this the post-Piers future?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one because if we think about the showbiz dynamic, when you go on to I'm a Celeb to Get Me Out of Here, you're doing it for two reasons. One is because you want to become part of the ITV family with This Morning. And the second thing is that ITV use a couple of their stars each year and give them their own shows. So Vernon Kay, for example, did it, and he'd been away from the industry for a couple of years. He's since had cover on another radio station. He's got a new game show starting on ITV, and last night he was on Anton Leck's Saturday Night Takeaway in their little sketch show. So Victoria Derbyshire hasn't had any work since The Jungle or since The Castle. So I could imagine this is a really good signing. And also what it means is ITV can own her. So she'll do Good Morning Britain in the morning. But I could very well see a couple of documentaries in the evening all about breast cancer, which is what she wants to talk about a lot more of. She's done a couple of Panorama specials, but we've not really seen much of her away from the news agenda. So as Susanna Reid has done, I would like to think that Victoria Derbyshire can do the same.
Well, that's it. The other one I saw doing the rounds yesterday was Judge Rinder apparently might be stepping in to do it. I don't know whether he's just fostering these things himself or he's got a very slick PR operation, but I actually think I quite like that idea, potentially, Judge Rinder and the, dishing it out in the mornings. But anyway, on this sort of topic of Piers Morgan, Piers Morgan's book is now #1 in the Amazon charts. They say when you go woke, you go broke. Well, he's definitely not woke, is he? And he's definitely not broke either. So what's going on with Piers?
This has been an amazing week for Piers Morgan. And if we just think about the publicity he's had, so obviously he had the Good Morning Britain walkout on Tuesday.
Yes.
Then we're now being told there's a £10 million bidding war between America and GB News, that he might be going to one of their places. Then we've got the fact that he's got a book out, which came out last October. He came on to Mike Graham's show as a guest. It was an amazing half-an-hour debate they both had once upon a time. But his book has gone back to #1 in the Amazon chart. And it's all happened this week. So I actually think this has been the perfect week for Piers to re-evaluate where is his career and what can he do next. He's done 6 years at Good Morning Britain. He took over BBC Breakfast, which is what his goal was. We know how robust he is. We know that he ripped up the running order for what a breakfast show should be like. So this has just been the perfect end to a week for Piers Morgan.
Well, it has been, and I think as well, there's a lot to this Piers Morgan issue, wasn't there? Piers Morgan and I have quite a prominent mutual friend, and that mutual friend had actually called me up the night before Piers' walkout and said he was quite concerned about him because apparently he was knackered and he just didn't really fancy it anymore working at those times. And there is that, isn't there? I think it's all very well and good making this free speech claim as well. I think it was a useful, convenient time for him to look for pastures new, and there are other options out there. Where do you see him going in all truth? Do you think where do you think he'll go? Do you think he'll stay in TV, or do you think he'll look to branch out into radio and, dare I say, maybe here?
Ooh, that's an idea. Is there a slot going here?
As long as he doesn't want to do the weekend slots 10 a.m. till 1 p.m, then I'm absolutely banging in favour of that.
What if it was a co-hosting job? So he joined you as a co-host, or you're his co-host?
Don't fancy being the Susanna Reid of Talk Radio, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think I'd get a word in edgeways, would I? But yeah, no, go on. So where do you think you might see him going? Have you got any whispers?
Well, I think the thing with Piers is he's a broadcaster, he's a journalist, and he's very talented. He can work on any platform. And I think it'll be very much up to him what he does. He's brought a book out, which is what one would think he would be doing, but obviously he's done that already. So I think he'll definitely have another book deal. He's obviously got his Mail Online column. He's dominating the TV already with Live Stories. So Live Stories is back on Thursday at 9 o'clock with Colleen Nolan, the last in the series. So if I was him, I would just take a bit of a break and just see what's out there. There's going to be a lot of money being put out on the desk for him. So, yeah, it could be anyone's game.
Well, it's interesting times, isn't it? And there is certainly a lot of opportunity out there at the moment, and Piers Morgan is ideally placed. I mean, the fact is the world's his oyster, isn't it? He could go back to America, he could do whatever, and I think he's positioned himself quite well. It did open up a huge debate, didn't it, about whether or not you believe what Harry and Meghan were dishing out in their Oprah interview. Look, I don't know if you've heard this, Johnny. I heard a little rumour that there might be a part 2 to this interview, that apparently there might be. Have you heard anything to do with that, or is this just an unsolicited Twitter rumour?
There's been a lot of clips that didn't make the edit. Obviously, we know how media works. So we know that in a normal interview, that's been like Oprah, which went out for 90 minutes. It would have been recorded for 3 hours. There are a couple of clips that did make the rounds online that didn't make the cut. So I think that is where this has come from. I don't think they're going to be doing a part 2. I think the story has been told. They've got the headlines. It was a really soft interview, but they knew what they were getting. We know that all the questions asked, they basically said, look, we're going to tell you all of this already. So it wasn't going to be a robust, hard-hitting interview. And therefore, I don't think there needs to be a part 2. I don't think there was anything that was unsaid from them. Obviously, it's opened up a lot of questions around them, but I don't think from them we'd see a part 2. And I don't think Oprah would do that part 2 as well. I think it needs, maybe even Piers, to do that part 2, but with other members of the family.
Well, that's the other side of it that I would quite like to get now, isn't it? Which is maybe a similar interview, but maybe with Meghan's, family, basically, and just get their take on it. But Johnny, thank you very, very much. It's brilliant to have you on as always. Thank you for all your efforts over these weekend shows. Johnny Seifert, their Talk Radio's showbiz editor. Just running you through what we can expect in the week ahead. Bob Mills is here with me, ladies and gentlemen, the man himself. Bob, how are you?
Hello, my friend. How are you?
You got another cracker of a show lined up today,
Johnny
or what?
Seifert, what a lovely lad. What a lovely lad he is.
Yes.
Very talented. Got his finger on the pulse of show business. Nothing happens in the world of show business without Johnny Seifert knowing.
Yes.
Fantastic lad. How are you?
I'm all right, mate. All the better for having you on board.
You had a lovely show. I've been listening to your show. It's been lovely. And I love that suit.
Oh, do you? I look like I work at Butlins. I think I've got a red.
You know what that colour was when I was a young man? It was called mulberry.
Is it? Oh gosh, yeah. So I think we might have
suit.
morphed into burgundy now. I'm not sure, but
no,
hey,
it's never quite burgundy.
It's not, is it? It's a reach, isn't it?
It's a beautiful suit, and you look smart, and that's it. And you know what's a great thing for you and for me? What's happening Monday?
What?
Barbers are opening.
Yeah. Oh gosh, mate. Honestly, this is ridiculous. Yeah, it's my. I've never. It's just become unmanageable. Actually, I just absolutely cannot operate in these. I can't work like this. Anyway, Bob, what's on your show?
Oh, it's a slightly more serious one on Sunday. Not hugely serious. Jasmine Birtles from Money Magpie has the pandemic affected our money. Dr. Sam Voss has it affected children. But then we got Josh Rom, who's our radio showbiz reporter, and also Philip from South Norwood.
I love Josh Robb, by the way. He's excellent. Fantastic stuff. Well, look, Bob, that sounds like an absolutely epic box office show, and no doubt people will be tuning in up and down the nation in their droves. 1 till 4. Thank you very, very much, Bob. Great to... this is probably the highlight.
Droves? I'd have wanted more than a drove.
Hordes?
Yeah, hordes.
Hordes. Yeah.
I think droves, 20 or 30 people can be a drove.
Can they? I suppose, yeah. When's a drove, a horde?
I would say a horde, yes.
A horde's better, isn't
Yes.
it? Yeah, we'll go with horde. Anyway, good stuff. Right, okay, Bob, thank you very, very much. Look, you can call in for Bob as well. Excuse me, 03444991000, text talk. And your message to 87222, tweet us at Talk Radio. And thank you very much as well for everybody who's been watching on YouTube. It's been brilliant to have you all on board. I've been Patrick Christys. I'll be back again next weekend from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. I would just urge everybody, if you get the chance, go on YouTube, watch the show back, or go onto our on-demand section. You can see some of the top guests that we've had on this. Tobias Elwood as well, the chair of the Defence Select Committee. He came in, he kind of led in the show about this devastating report that was doing the rounds today. Revealed today that our armed forces, essentially, if Putin tries it on, we're knackered. That's the upshot of it. They use slightly more diplomatic language than that, and I am paraphrasing somewhat, but that is the reality of the situation. Go back and have a listen to Tobias Elwood, chair of the Defence Secretary, who fronted up my show. Thank you very much, everybody. I've been Patrick Christys. This has been Talk Radio. I'll see you next weekend.